Chapter 551, Internal Conflict. Chapter 551, Internal Conflict. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Mir Liezi narrowed his eyes when he heard Feng Turan's words, and he cast a cold glance at her. Back then, Feng Turan was at the peak of the early-stage Soul Conduit realm, pressuring the then Mir Liezi, who had just entered early-stage Soul Conduit realm, which left him without a choice but to work with the Federation. However, he had gradually advanced in his cultivation, and the difference between him and Feng Turan wasn't large. Despite that, unless he had no choice, he didn't want to go against Feng Turan. After all, there was still Yuran as one of the elders of the vast expanse Dao Palace. Even though Yuran always seemed nonchalant about matters, Mir Liezi was still vigilant towards him. Mir Liezi was about to speak when Yuran, who was beside him, sighed. Mir Liezi, Feng Turan, stop arguing, the both of you. This happens every time. However, Elder Mir Liezi was right about something. What's most important is the incident involving the Hyacinthus tree. I also think that we should first reach a conclusion regarding the Hyacinthus tree before discussing other matters. What do you think? With Daoist Yuran acting as the peacemaker like always, Feng Turan silently nodded her head as an indication of her agreement to discuss the Hyacinthus tree issue first. 37 years ago, 7 leaves fell off the Hyacinthus tree, and now, there's only 3. The number of falling leaves are decreasing, and it is likely that only 1 will fall the next time. Daoist Yuran sighed softly, and a look of anxiousness and concern could be seen in his eyes. That means that we only have 3 tokens this time around. If everything goes smoothly, 3 disciples could enter the Worship Palace Pavilion of the vast expanse Dao Palace, and carve their names down on the Dao plate based on the opportunities that they have obtained. That will allow them to be bestowed with an identity as a true Dao Palace disciple. Do both of you have any suggestions on how to choose the 3 disciples? As Daoist Yuran spoke, he looked towards Mir Liezi and Feng Turan. Without waiting for Feng Turan, Mir Liezi began speaking with a cold tone. Back then, there were 7 leaves, and we sent 7 people, but 4 of them didn't survive. Only Kai Lin and 3 others successfully became the outer sect disciples of the Dao Palace. There were simply too many losses. Furthermore, since we only have 3 leaves now, I don't think there is any meaning to sending anyone there. Hearing those words, Feng Turan was immediately displeased and began speaking. The leaf of the Hyacinthus tree is the token needed for one to officially be part of the vast expanse Dao Palace. This is a tradition that has been passed down since the Dao Palace was established. Wasn't that the case for us too? Even though there is some danger in entering the Worship Palace Pavilion now, the fact that the Hyacinthus tree still sheds its leaves means that there is a significance behind it. Perhaps there could really be someone whose opportunity is so valuable that he is able to become an inner sect disciple. That would mean a lot to us. Of course, if Elder Mir Liezi doesn't agree, you can give up on the eligibility to receive the Hyacinthus tree leaf for the disciples under your wing. As Feng Turan spoke, Mir Liezi laughed suddenly. What Elder Feng said makes sense. I have not been considerate. Since this is the case, it's easy to distribute the 3 leaves. We shall receive 1 leaf each, and let our respective disciples undergo a trial. The winner of the trial will receive the Hyacinthus tree leaf. Right now, the disciples are too complacent. We must let them know how brutal cultivation can be, that it is a fight between people and the heavens. After all, back in the day, the 3 of us also overcome all sorts of trials to achieve what we have today. With that, Mir Liezi narrowed his eyes and looked towards Feng Turan. However, he was laughing evilly in his heart. On the surface, whatever he said about distributing the 3 leaves amongst the 3 of them sounded fair, but in reality, there was an evil intent behind it. For Daoist Mir Liezi and Yuran, they could appear to let their disciples battle it out to receive the Hyacinthus tree leaf on the surface, but actually make the decision through a simple command. However, it was a different case for Feng Turan. That was because things were made more complicated with the involvement of the Federation under her lead. Even though she had tried to prevent it, 2 different factions were forming. One continued to support Feng Turan, while the other was beginning to show signs of revolt amidst their silence. Building on the formation of the 2 factions, that was the case for the disciples as well. The Federation seedlings were weak and could only stick with each other. While the other disciples of the faction working under Feng Turan supported them, They were unable to see the Federation seedlings as their own in a short period of time. Therefore, the problem now lay in who to give the leaf to. If it had to be obtained through battling like Liezi suggested, there would be an issue of whether the Federation seedlings should participate. If they participated, then the Federation seedlings would definitely have to fight with each other for the hyacinthus tree leaf, and it would be inevitable that deaths and injuries would result. After all, not many would give up on this valuable opportunity. Therefore, once the real battle began, the distance between the Federation and the complex web of factions under Feng Churan would grow continuously, despite it being a fair and reasonable battle. However, if the Federation seedlings weren't allowed to participate, this differential treatment would still widen the gap between them. At the same time, even if Feng Churan didn't choose to let the disciples battle it out, she would still be faced with a similar dilemma. Giving the leaf to anyone amongst the Federation seedlings would cause unhappiness amongst the cultivators under her lead and vice versa. According to Liez's plan, regardless of how this issue was handled, conflict would arise between Feng Churan and the Federation. Then, if a further push were given, it would definitely result in the switching of alliances amongst the currently unhappy cultivators under Feng Churan's lead right now. That was a sinister plot. From the beginning, his disagreement towards welcoming the second batch of Federation seedlings, and his opinion that the hyacinthus tree leaf was meaningless, were all to set the stage so that he could make the proposal for the battle. After all, if Feng Churan was so adamant at preserving the tradition, she couldn't object to the suggested method of distributing the leaf. Through this, it also gave Daoist Yuran the autonomy of choice. Liezi believed that even if Feng Churan were to see the problem in his proposal, it would be difficult for her to go against it. At the same time, he had made preparations for what to come. In reality, even though Feng Churan appeared indecisive and slightly weak, she wasn't stupid. After she thought about it, she retracted her gaze, apparently realizing the traps in Liez's proposal. She was about to speak when Daoist Yuran laughed and began speaking while nodding his head. This is indeed a good suggestion. I agree. Feng Churan fell silent, an awful expression on her face upon hearing Daoist Yuran's words. She had been too laid back in terms of how she handled the matter today. In addition, it was possible that Liezi and Daoist Yuran had secretly collaborated with each other to make her helpless. At the same time, the more one thought about this matter, the more frightening it seemed. The significance of everything deepened once it became confirmed that the two of them had reached a consensus regarding the matter, and that it wasn't a spontaneous decision made by Daoist Yuran himself. All these thoughts were darting about Feng Churan's mind. She knew that she needed to find a way out of this situation as soon as possible. If not, once everything went according to Liez's proposal, she would completely lose all say. Furthermore, she still didn't believe that Daoist Yuran would suddenly choose a side after being a neutral party all these years. With that thought, a chilly look flashed across Feng Churan's eyes. She raised her right hand and hit the handle of the seat beside her. As a loud sound was produced as the chair broke apart. She stood up, with anger and pain in her eyes. Liezi, Yuran, the main Dao Palace has been sealed now, leaving the patriarchs either in hibernation or missing. The three of us have the huge responsibility to rebuild the inner sect disciples of the Dao Palace, and this is not the time to go our separate ways. Liezi, what intentions do you have by mentioning the three lineages all the time? There is only one lineage, instead of three, in the vast expanse Dao Palace. There is also only one vast expanse Dao Palace. Liezi, are you trying to establish a lineage by yourself? Feng Churan let out a cold tone and a desire to kill in her eyes that was rarely seen. That was especially so due to the agitated and angry look in her eyes, which made her killing intent carry a meaning of anger and pain. Yuran was shocked as he looked at Feng Churan without saying anything. Liezi also didn't seem to have expected Feng Churan to pick on his mention of the three lineages and was now thrown into a bad light. With an awful expression on his face, he was about to speak, but Feng Churan didn't give him the chance to, as her agitated voice was heard once again. There is no need to distribute the hyacinthus tree leaves equally amongst the so-called three lineages. We are all members of the vast expanse Dao Palace, and we will each assign 200 core formation realm disciples, totaling 600 of them, and let them go through a trial to obtain the three leaves. In addition, no deaths are allowed in the Dao Palace. Therefore, the trial must take place in the endless possibilities array formation. Daoist Yuran, what do you think of that? As Feng Churan spoke, she turned towards Daoist Yuran. This. I agree. Both your proposals are feasible, and I am agreeable with either of them. With a bitter laugh, Daoist Yuran nodded and agreed. At the same time, he even tried to calm things down between Feng Churan and Mia Liezi. Mia Liezi, on the other hand, looked deeply into Feng Churan's eyes. He realized that he had made a mistake this time, especially as he needed to avoid being seen as divisive and wanting to strike out on his own. After a moment of silence, Mia Liezi snorted and didn't speak, silently agreeing to Feng Churan's proposal. Chapter 552, Each Making Their Own Preparations. Chapter 552, Each Making Their Own Preparations. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Even though she managed to resolve Mia Liezi's proposal, Feng Churan was still troubled. In reality, even if everything went according to her proposal, it was still extremely disadvantageous to her. However, she had no other choice. If Mia Liezi's proposal were adopted, there would basically be no way out. Therefore, her current proposal of having 600 people battle it out was the best that she could think of within the short period of time. As such, thoughts continuously ran through her mind as she tried to analyze the advantages and disadvantages. She was also thinking about whether there were better ways to influence this matter to a state that would be beneficial for her. However, it was clear that Mia Liezi wouldn't give Feng Churan the time to ponder over it. As he snorted, he diverted the topic away from the hyacinthus tree leaves, and dived into the second matter to be discussed. I'm still against the second batch of Federation seedlings. Those Federation seedlings don't have much value in terms of capability or other qualities. Their presence in the Dao Palace is simply a waste of our already limited resources. Those resources are sufficient for us to cultivate disciples who are even more capable than them. Mia Liezi didn't mince his words. However, Feng Churan couldn't agree with that, and she spoke as she laughed coldly. The fact that the Federation seedlings all managed to improve in such a short period of time implies that they all have great potential. At the same time, the population of the Federation is bigger. Even though they have just begun to cultivate, they will definitely grow to a state that will benefit us in no time. Furthermore, since this matter has long been decided, no changes are allowed. The second batch of Federation seedlings must come as agreed. Feng Churan. Mia Liezi stood up slowly, his soul conduit realm cultivation suddenly being unleashed. A look of hostility appeared in his eyes, and he seemed like he would attack her if he heard something that he didn't agree with. Feng Churan may have a soft character, but there was no giving way this time as it involved plans that had been decided. After all, unlike previously, this didn't just involve setting up an obstacle for the alliance between her and the Federation. Instead, this involved breaking the alliance. As such, her cultivation was similarly unleashed, and her aura was emanated as a chilly look appeared in her eyes. Seeing that both of them were so hot-headed, Daoist Yuran stood up and went between the two, laughing bitterly while shaking his head. Don't fight anymore, the both of you. Junior Sister Churan, how about this? If you have such a good opinion of the Federation, why don't we see how they perform in the trial this time? We have already decided that a total of 600 people will participate in the trial this time. Even though only core formation realm cultivators are eligible, I remember that there are also some core formation realm cultivators amongst the Federation seedlings. Therefore, let's allow them to participate as well. If someone eventually manages to obtain the identity token, it would mean that they indeed have some value. Then, we can agree to let the second batch of Federation seedlings come. However, if they are unable to obtain it. Junior Sister Churan, recently, many have indicated to me their doubts about you. When I think about it occasionally, I also feel that Junior Brother Mia Liezi's stance is perhaps not wrong. Hearing Daoist Yuran's words, Feng Churan was shocked. Her heart skipped a beat, and her pupils constricted when she looked towards Daoist Yuran. From the previous incident, she had already sensed Daoist Yuran leaning towards Mia Liezi. Right now, on this second matter, Daoist Yuran spoke like a peacemaker, but the meaning behind his words were signs that he was siding with Mia Liezi. Mia Liezi smiled and didn't speak anymore. Instead, both he and Daoist Yuran looked at Feng Churan. The entire great hall fell into silence. Feng Churan felt bitterness in her heart. She wanted to change things but had no ability to do so. 3 days later, a decree that all of the disciples anticipated and were shocked at receiving was announced directly from the main hall. A trial will begin 7 days later. The top 3 cultivators will be given a hyacinthus tree leaf. When the news emerged, a commotion arose amongst numerous disciples. As they discussed amongst themselves, they tried to find out more details. Even the Federation seedlings went into heated discussion after hearing of the matter. Wang Baoli also had his attention on the 3 tree leaves after realizing that his dried fruit was the fruit of the hyacinthus tree. Therefore, he was immediately tempted after receiving the news from the sect. After that, he opened up the regional group chat to look at the discussions on it, and also contacted Yun Piaozi to ask for further details. As a native cultivator of the vast expanse Dao Palace, and with the relatively impressive background of his, Yun Piaozi knew a lot more than the Federation. If someone else had asked him, he wouldn't have revealed anything. However, since it was Wang Baoli who was asking, Yun Piaozi didn't withhold anything and told him everything he knew. This time, the 3 elders will send out 200 people each to participate in the trial. The competition will be strong, especially as the trial takers must be core formation realm cultivators at the very least. However, there is no restriction on the level of core formation realm cultivation, which is to say that in this trial, there could be early stage core formation realm cultivators or those who have perfected core formation realm cultivation. Wang Baoli raised his eyebrows upon hearing that. What is the purpose of this trial, then? Yun Piaozi chuckled when he heard the question, before sending another voice transmission. There is, of course, no meaning. Most disciples wouldn't stand a chance. Therefore, to a certain extent, this is very unfair. I guess that everything has already been secretly determined, and others are just there to be part of the show. However, these are just my guesses. I have also heard that in response to the unfairness, the 3 elders have made alternative preparations. As for the details, they would probably only be made known when the trial begins. Yun Piaozi was only aware of all that. He didn't know of the finer details. Wang Baoli even sent a voice transmission to Xie Haiyang to ask about it and received the same answer. Xie Haiyang wasn't unaware of the finer details on how to resolve the unfairness, but he required a hefty payment. Even though he had given Wang Baoli a great discount on account of them having numerous transactions, Wang Baoli still felt that Xie Haiyang was too opportunistic and directly rejected his offer. 50,000 battle credits for a piece of news. Extortion. Wang Baoli mumbled as he put down the voice transmission ring. He couldn't bear to buy it, as, after all, everyone would know if they simply waited for a maximum of 7 more days. Even though there were advantages to knowing about it in advance, Wang Baoli still felt that it wasn't worth it the more he thought about it. Therefore, he refocused his attention on Feng Churan, thinking about whether he should pay her a visit. After all, his current batch of Federation seedlings could be considered to be under her lead. He was also a core formation realm cultivator and would probably have a place amongst the 200 people. While Wang Baoli was deep in thought, Feng Churan was in her cave abode, immersed in her low spirits. She had been unhappy for the past few days, as the alliance between Daoisturan and Mieliezi this time had left her helpless in retaliating. After analyzing the matter in detail, she realized that Mieliezi had the upper hand throughout the entire negotiation. Right now, there was a huge problem before her. If she wanted to maintain the alliance with the Federation, one of the Federation disciples had to receive a hyacinthus tree leaf. However, there were 2 challenges to accomplishing this. The first was that more unhappiness might arise in the people under her lead, which would increase their disloyalty towards her. That was still a secondary problem, as the second, and most important point is that for the Federation to receive the leaf, it was simply too difficult. Even though she was optimistic about the Federation's capabilities, she was optimistic about its future, not its present. In reality, she also didn't think that, at this stage, the Federation cultivators were more capable than the vast expanse Dao Palace cultivators. Under her judgment, it was impossible to emerge in the top 3 in the 600-people trial. After all, there were numerous personal disciples amongst them. Their potential and brilliance, when fully supported by the vast expanse Dao Palace, were things that the Federation couldn't compete against. Therefore, in order to accomplish the second point, there was a need to make her personal disciples give up. Thinking of that, she sighed and looked towards the door of her cave abode. Before long, greetings were heard outside her cave abode, and 2 cultivators entered. The duo were youths, one as good-looking as a lady. When he stood there, he let out an elegant and gentle demeanor. If he held a fan in his hands, he would seem like a young master. After entering the cave abode, he greeted Feng Churan with cupped fists. Disciple Xu Ming greets master. Disciple Lu Yun greets master. The other person looked older and clearly stronger in terms of physique. There was a look of determination in his eyes, like a hill. Even his voice was powerful. Looking at both of them, a smile finally appeared on Feng Churan's face. Both of them were the disciples that she looked upon most favorably, and they were also well-known core formation realm disciples in the Dao Palace. They could be considered the juniors she had the highest hopes of in her entire line. Minga and Yuna, I have a task that I need both of you to complete. Chapter 553, Li Xingwen and Feng Churan. Chapter 553, Li Xingwen and Feng Churan. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The moment they heard Feng Churan's words, Xu Ming and Lu Yun both put on a serious expression as they stood and waited for their master to give instructions. Feng Churan felt heartened looking at the facial expressions of the 2 disciples that she valued most. After a brief moment of silence, she began to speak. Both of you should have heard of the trial that will take place 7 days later by now. I want the 2 of you to emerge in the top 3 regardless of anything in this trial. One of the positions must be given to a participant of the trial from the Federation at the last moment. I will pay both of you generously for this. With that, a sharp look appeared in Feng Churan's eyes as she looked at her 2 disciples. Xu Ming and Lu Yun remained silent, before cupping their fists and nodding their heads to heed the order. Even though she noticed that there were no changes in the facial expression of her 2 personal disciples, Feng Churan still sensed the torrent of emotions in both of them. She also knew that this request was unreasonable, but she didn't have any other way out. Therefore, she began to speak softly with a gentle expression on her face. I promise to provide a boost to the person who gives up on their position so that when his cultivation is in the process of breaking through to the nascent soul realm, he will reach mid-stage nascent soul realm immediately. Hearing that, Xu Ming and Lu Yun looked surprised, and a glow could be seen in their eyes. Previously, they were indeed unwilling to fulfill their master's request, but if they could be compensated in this manner, they were motivated. Master, what if there is only one position? Lu Yun suddenly spoke. One is fine as well, but that is the bare minimum. After a moment of silence, Feng Churan answered. Master, if we want to enter the top 3 in this trial, both of us need to put in our utmost effort. Therefore, it's not possible for us to look after the Federation cultivators. If we don't need to consider the Federation cultivators and could fight for it with our full effort, it is more likely that we would succeed. Furthermore, we could, at the very least, give the Hyacinthus tree leaf to someone from the Federation when the trial ends and let that person go to the Worship Palace Pavilion. After thinking about it, Xu Ming looked towards Feng Churan. Feng Churan frowned and had wanted to reply. However, after thinking about it, she also realized that if she were too strong-willed regarding this matter, it would indeed increase the difficulty of the task significantly. After all, they had to look after the Federation cultivators and had to stay vigilant of the strong competitors. Furthermore, the rules of this trial were unique. Therefore, after thinking it through, she understood that she had been too idealistic. As such, after considering the situation, she felt that even if the Federation didn't emerge in the top 3 and didn't fulfill Mia Liez's proposed idea, she only needed to give the Federation a Hyacinthus tree leaf in the end, which could be taken as having met the requirements to a certain extent. The worst that could happen was that she needed to continue fighting it out with Mia Liezi. At the same time, if the Federation disciples could enter the Worship Palace Pavilion with the Hyacinthus tree leaf after the trial, and eventually attain the status of a true Dao Palace disciple, it would help her plan to move things forward significantly. Until then, many things could change, and it didn't mean that she had to contend with Mia Liez's plans. With that thought, Feng Churan knew that she couldn't hesitate anymore, she had to make a decision. As such, she gritted her teeth. Try your best to look after them. If it's simply too hard, then both of you are to focus on your task. Listening to Feng Churan's words, Lu Yun and Xu Ming heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't belittle the Federation cultivators, but they didn't have good impressions of them either. Basically, they felt that they were still a burden, and right now, after hearing their master's decision, they thought it over and inquired further. They only left respectfully after Feng Churan informed both of them of the rules of the trial. Looking at the back view of her disciples, Feng Churan sighed. After thinking about it, she called for her bellboy and made arrangements for him to inform the Federation seedlings Wang Baoli, Zhao Yameng, and Kong Dao to pay her a visit. Feng Churan still valued the Federation seedlings. That was especially so in terms of their progress in their cultivation. Feng Churan had managed to hear of Zhao Yameng's and Kong Dao's advancement quickly. Right now, as Feng Churan was calling for Wang Baoli and company, Mie Liezi was in his cave abode on the vast expanse Dao Palace's main island. He had called for the only personal disciple of his, Dugu Lin. "Lina, are you prepared for this trial?" Mie Liezi looked at the disciple before him, who was giving off a chilly vibe. A rare look of appreciation appeared in his eyes as he spoke slowly. "It's no problem for me to become number one." Dugu Lin's gaze remained cold, and his tone calm. "I don't want you to become number one. Instead, what I want is that in this trial, there is only one position and no other. Are you able to do that?" Mie Liezi narrowed his eyes as he looked at Dugu Lin. "Eliminate everyone? I'll try my best." Dugu Lin thought about it. There was no change to his calm tone. "Good. Lina, I allow you to unlock the seal of your body at appropriate times during this trial and unleash your full combat power. This should let everyone in the vast expanse Dao Palace know that the disciple of Mie Liezi is extremely formidable." A peculiar look appeared in Mie Liezi's eyes, one that was filled with anticipation. If that is the case, then, Dugu Lin curled his lips into a chilly smile. He raised his head and looked at Mie Liezi before saying the final 4 words. "As you wish, master." A chilly aura that was hidden in his body was about to be unleashed. That, coupled with the sinister smile, made even Mie Liezi appreciate how strong it was. He knew that his disciple was extraordinary. He wasn't only a rare talent in the cultivation world, a galactic dust combat body meant for combat, but he was also extremely intelligent, advancing significantly in his cultivation with just the time of a day. In addition, he was long eligible for a breakthrough into the nascent soul realm. However, he had a great goal of wanting to perfect and build a strong foundation. He depended on his uniqueness as a galactic dust combat body and a mystic technique of the vast expanse Dao Palace to seal himself. He planned to go past the nascent soul realm the moment he achieved a breakthrough and enter the soul conduit realm, and then sealing himself again. His goal was the planet realm after becoming a spirit immortal. From ancient times, those that managed to achieve this goal had all become mighty figures. Mie Liezi also admitted that when he was a core formation cultivator, that he wouldn't have been able to compare to his disciple even if there were 10 of himself. He also knew that with his talent and cultivation, a disciple like him would definitely be sought after by the upper powers of the Eternal Star, had the real Dao Palace not been devastated. It could be said that Feng Churan thought Mie Liezi was confident of his own cultivation. However, in reality, there was another aspect of Mie Liezi's confidence, and it came from this disciple of his. This disciple was the greatest effort and contribution that he had made for the sect. To him, even if the entire Federation was sacrificed and he were to use the Blood Sea and the spirits to pave the way to success for this disciple of his, it would be worth it. To him, this was a real talent, while people from the Federation were trash. Therefore, he planned to let Dugu Lin be the surprise this time around. He would also go all out against Feng Churan after this trial. Then, leveraging on the shock experienced by everyone in the sect, he was confident that he would have the power to initiate the destruction and sacrifice of the Federation. While Mie Liezi was feeling confident and ambitious, Wang Baoli, Zhao Yameng, and Kong Dao received Feng Churan's orders. They immediately departed the islands they were on and charged towards the main island of the vast expanse Dao Palace. Before long, the trio arrived one after another. They looked at each other, and even though they didn't speak, they could guess what was going on. Therefore, under the lead of the bellboy, they arrived in Feng Churan's cave abode. After greeting her and entering the cave abode, they noticed the somewhat tired Feng Churan sitting on the higher seat. "Greetings, Elder Feng." Wang Baoli immediately cupped his fists, and Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao followed suit. Feng Churan didn't speak and simply swept her gaze across the trio. She looked at each of them closely, especially at Wang Baoli. If it was some other time, she would have put on a look of appreciation. However, right now, she shook her head. To her, Wang Baoli and company were brilliant compared to the ordinary disciples, but were a far cry when compared to her two personal disciples. As she sighed in her heart, Feng Churan was somewhat despondent. She momentarily wavered in her decision to form an alliance with the Federation. After a while, she rubbed her forehead and gave up on the thought to encourage them, then she spoke. I have called you here to notify you that you will all be representatives from the Federation. Regardless of success and failure in the trial 7 days later, I will try to give you a hyacinthus tree leaf. I hope that all of you will do your best. You are dismissed, I'm tired. With that, Feng Churan closed her eyes. Wang Baoli and company were surprised, sensing that something was amiss. At the same time, they managed to infer something from her words. She seemed to feel that the three of them couldn't obtain the leaf with their own efforts. Wang Baoli raised his eyebrows and didn't speak. After looking at Zhao Yaming and Kong Dao, they turned to leave. As they turned, Feng Churan opened her eyes, looking at their backs as she spoke. The results of this trial will determine if the next batch of Federation seedlings will come. Wang Baoli, when you return to the Federation one day, tell Li Xingwen that I tried my best. With that, Feng Churan closed her eyes. An image of a small yet sturdy figure those years ago appeared in her mind. Many years later, she still didn't know if her acknowledgement of the Federation was due to the recognition of the Federation's potential or due to the crystal-clear figure looking at her. Chapter 554, Prepare. Chapter 554, Prepare. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. As Feng Churan's fatigued voice arrived from behind them, Wang Baoli and company stopped in their tracks, shocked by her words. They looked at each other and remained silent. After turning and cupping his fists again, Wang Baoli suddenly spoke. Elder Feng, can you please tell us the rules of the trial so that the three of us can make preparations? Feng Churan didn't say anything, as she felt that there was no meaning regardless of what she said. She waved her hand to signal the three of them to leave. Wang Baoli wanted to say something but stopped himself. In the end, he didn't continue to speak and turned to leave Feng Churan's cave abode. Having seen the trio take their leave, the emotional and mental fatigue felt by Feng Churan could no longer be hidden. It showed visibly on her body, especially on her face. Even though she wasn't feeling completely hopeless, she had already done everything that she could, with the most important being sending her two personal disciples to obtain the hyacinthus tree leaf. However, that was her limit. Unless she decided to completely cut ties with Mieliezi through a battle, she had no other ideas on how to handle the situation. However, even if she really were to fight it out, Mieliezi and Daoisturant's relationship, which was evident through this incident, made Feng Churan realize that there was no way she could turn the situation around anymore. Everything depends on how fate plays out, Feng Churan mumbled. She knew that even though her two personal disciples were outstanding individuals, matters like these leveraged heavily on luck as well. She had even mentally prepared herself for the possibility of failure. Even if they didn't fail, it was unknown whether this could allow her to get out of the difficult situation Mieliezi had put her in. Thoughts like these made Feng Churan extremely frustrated, and her fatigue compounded as a result. This resulted in her slightly regretting the decision she made those years ago, and for persevering all these years. There's no way out. Unless the three of them can make it to the top 3 through their own capabilities, obtaining a top position in the trial with integrity and earning a hyacinthus tree leaf with the entire vast expanse Dao Palace as witness. However, with their capabilities, how is it possible that they'll emerge the top amongst the 600 people? Unless a miracle happens. Feng Churan shut her eyes. She knew that she was daydreaming. As Feng Churan was feeling doubtful about herself and towards the alliance with the Federation, Wang Baoli and company, who had left the cave abode, didn't split up. Instead, with Wang Baoli's invitation, the three of them charged towards Wang Baoli's Green Fire Island. Along the way, they were each deep in thought and didn't speak. When they reached Wang Baoli's cave abode on Green Fire Island, a glow flashed across Kong Dao's eyes. He broke the silence first. There is trouble. Clearly, Elder Feng can no longer sustain the vast expanse Dao Palace. While this was what the Federation predicted, they must never have expected that it would happen so quickly. Furthermore, this trial seems to be an act of the vast expanse Dao Palace deliberately picking on us. If we don't manage to obtain a position, they will not allow the second batch of Federation seedlings to enter. Kong Dao was solemn, his mood heavily influenced by this matter. In reality, I have sensed that something wasn't right the last time I teleported cultivation techniques back to the Federation. The vast expanse Dao Palace teleportation array formation seemed to be equipped with some sort of algorithm such that it would inspect the cultivation techniques that we teleport back. Put simply, it allowed the cultivation technique to be sent back, but it didn't allow other information that is unrelated to the cultivation technique. Zhao Yameng looked calm as she spoke, informing Wang Baoli and Kong Dao of what she had been investigating these days. There's such a thing as well. Kong Dao had an awful expression on his face as he looked towards Wang Baoli, waiting for him to make a decision. After all, when they were on Mars, Wang Baoli was Kong Dao's superior. He was used to listening to Wang Baoli's commands. Right here, Wang Baoli was also the leader, and as such, regardless of whether it was him or Zhao Yameng, they were both waiting for Wang Baoli to determine a plan of action. Wang Baoli looked solemn as well. In reality, for the past year, his understanding of the vast expanse Dao Palace had grown deeper than the other Federation disciples. He had long realized that Feng Churan was somewhat indecisive towards the Federation seedlings, being firm sometimes but also wavering occasionally. On the one hand, this was because of the different choices made by the cultivators under Feng Churan's lead, and on the other, it was because Mie Liezi was another strong force. It must be mentioned that Mie Liezi's power gained the recognition of many vast expanse Dao Palace disciples, including disciples of both Feng Churan and Daoist Yuran. There were some disciples under them that gradually agreed with Mie Liezi. The idea that the vast expanse Dao Palace was supreme was slowly becoming mainstream. That made Mie Liezi's power slowly but steadily increase, such that it had surpassed that of Feng Churan's to become the only voice of the vast expanse Dao Palace. It was all a matter of time before that happened, and that was also a situation that the Federation had anticipated. As such, the Federation had sent the current batch of Federation seedlings to support Feng Churan. However, it seems that there was insufficient time. The purpose and effect of the support couldn't be seen yet, but this crisis had already started to unfold. Once the three of them failed in obtaining a position in the trial, it would mean that there would likely not be the next batch of Federation seedlings. That wasn't the most serious consequence. The worst consequence was that once Mie Liezi became the main authority in the vast expanse Dao Palace, what would likely happen next would be a war between the vast expanse Dao Palace and the Federation. Wang Baoli thought about this possibility, and so did Kong Dao and Zhao Yameng. Therefore, anxiety was clear in their eyes. However, they had no solutions and could only look towards Wang Baoli. Since that is the case, the three of us shall just emerge in the top 3 and obtain a position in the trial. This is the most direct solution. After a moment of silence, a look of determination appeared in Wang Baoli's eyes, along with a chilly glow as he uttered each word. Even a chilly aura could be sensed from his tone, and that made both Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao's breathing quicken. They revealed a look of determination in their eyes. It's a pity that Elder Phone didn't reveal the rules of the trial to us. In the days to come, we need to make use of the relations of the Federation seedlings to find out more about it. Yameng, Kong Dao, both of you must make ample preparations in the next few days. This time, let's see if we can shock the vast expanse Dao Palace. Additionally, I want to know whether those elites of the vast expanse Dao Palace are indeed better than us Federation disciples. With that, Wang Baoli grew even more competitive. His words made Kong Dao and Zhao Yameng more assured. Therefore, after discussing the details, Kong Dao and Zhao Yameng left. When the two of them had left, Wang Baoli thought about matters and contacted Xie Haiyang. He planned to spend battle credits in exchange for information regarding the rules of the trial. However, Xie Haiyang didn't pick up. Wang Baoli frowned. After a while, when he noticed that Xie Haiyang had not replied, he decided to not waste any more time. He immediately decided to go into seclusion, maintaining his cultivation at an optimal level while making preparations specifically for the trial. He first tidied up his dharmic armaments. Of them, the tricolored flying sword and a copper coin runic soldier that he could control were the most powerful Dharmic armaments he had. Even though they weren't true 9th grade Dharmic armaments according to definition, they were close. Other than that, amongst his 8th grade Dharmic armaments, other than the ribbon that appeared like an 8th grade Dharmic armament, there were 10 treasures that could only be used once. Wang Baoli also had some 7th grade Dharmic armaments. Regardless of whether they were the megaphone or the flying sword and saber that he had refined, they could all be considered Dharmic treasures for daily use. What's next are the puppets. However, there isn't enough time, and the refinement materials needed are simply too expensive. There is also a low success rate. If the puppets could be upgraded to 7th grade Dharmic armaments, they would definitely help significantly in boosting my combat capabilities. Wang Baoli shook his head as he arranged the Dharmic armaments. Then, he sat down with crossed legs and began thinking about his spells. The arch armor, which he had cultivated, could be used as his trump card. However, he didn't know the rules of the trial, and even if the trial permitted killing, they would never allow large-scale deaths to happen. At the same time, there would definitely be spectators watching the trial, and that restricted him, making it difficult to unleash the power of the arch armor fully. There's also the lightning avatar. Wang Baoli mumbled and thought about his dark art and physical power. However, he still didn't feel confident. He shut his eyes and thought about it, and finally, a cold glow flashed across his face. Alternatively, should I equip the arch armor with a certain level of combat power using the method of flame snatch, so that it would be foolproof in the trial? With that thought, Wang Baoli stood up immediately. He left his cave abode and grabbed onto the donkey, stuffing it in his storage bag before charging towards the Sea of Fire. Refining the arch armor using the method of flame snatch required some killing to occur. Since there was no one to kill now, Wang Baoli could only enter the Sea of Fire to search for beasts he could kill in order to use the flame snatch on the arch armor. Chapter 555, Killing the Demonic Armor. Chapter 555, Killing the Demonic Armor. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. There are still 6 days left, and I must be fast. Wang Baoli, who was in the Sea of Fire, made some estimations and realized that there wasn't much time left for him. In addition, the trial that was to happen 6 days later was extremely important, affecting the alliance between the Federation and the vast expanse Dao Palace, or in other words, whether a battle would happen between both sides. In reality, the sly old foxes in the Federation had long analyzed and even simulated the possible battle between the Federation and the vast expanse Dao Palace. Even though the Federation would definitely be defeated if they could delay the start of the battle, the chances of the Federation would increase with every 10 years. To a certain extent, it might be possible that the battle couldn't happen if it were sufficiently delayed. After all, the process of infiltration involved paying a price. If the price to pay were extremely large, then even if Feng Churan were to be weak in terms of power, then she would also make use of the chance to express her stance against it, in order to regain power. These thoughts were either secretly made known to Wang Baoli by Li Xingwen before he entered the vast expanse Dao Palace, or concluded by Wang Baoli himself after some analysis. As those thoughts circled around his head, he had already arrived in the Sea of Fire and was continuing his advance. As he advanced, the diamond-shaped spot formed from the arch armor on Wang Baoli's heart was shimmering and being released. That awakened Wang Baoli's meridians, with the spot forming a continuity with his spirit chi to be released from his body. Soon, the outline of a huge man was formed outside his body. The outline was completely formed by the meridians that formed a continuity with the spirit chi. It was translucent and would be difficult to notice if one didn't take a close look, especially in the Sea of Fire. After that, a flash appeared across Wang Baoli's eyes. With the first round of activation and transformation of the arch armor, a powerful force could be felt in his body, as if he had donned on an indestructible armor. It gave him the illusion that he could destroy every life form. What's next is to find all the beasts I can kill and kill them using flame snatch. After that, I will absorb their mythical chi to form the store of energy for my flame snatch the arch armor. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes, raising and waving his right arm as he took the donkey out of his storage bag. Scram, find all life forms except for that of cultivators in the Sea of Fire. Even before the donkey could take a clear look at its surroundings, it heard Wang Baoli's voice. Due to the presence of the arch armor, his voice was somewhat loud and authoritative. The donkey shuddered, and its eyes widened after it took a clear look at Wang Baoli. Others couldn't see the translucent Dharach armor clearly, but the donkey, being near and possessing unique abilities, couldn't only get a clear look, but could also instinctively sense a frightening aura emanating from Wang Baoli's Dharach armor that made it shiver. Even though it was weak and was hidden deeply, the donkey could still sense it instinctively. Therefore, it responded quickly, and hurriedly nodded its head without hesitation in front of Wang Baoli. It immediately began to check its surroundings diligently, even sniffling around with its nose. It seemed to be able to sense the aura in the sea of fire, and soon, its eyes lit up and it leaped forward. The donkey was so fast that Wang Baoli was surprised. He thought to himself that either the donkey had some dog genes, or one of its parents was a dog, resulting in it having such a sensitive nose and the habit of wiggling its tail. As Wang Baoli curiously thought about the donkey's parents, the donkey had already brought Wang Baoli to an undersea hill. Shrill screams could be heard the moment they neared, and immediately, 3 inferno rats rushed out and escaped. Without waiting for the donkey to chase after them, a flash appeared across Wang Baoli's eyes as he swiftly turned and charged full speed ahead, forming waves in the sea of fire as he pursued the 3 inferno rats. No matter how hard the inferno rats tried to struggle and escape, they couldn't succeed and were instantly caught by Wang Baoli as he grabbed them with his right hand. He was so fast that, in the blink of an eye, there was an inferno rat caught in his large hand as he chanted the words "Flame Snatch" in his mind. The moment he chanted those 2 words, a bloody glow emerged from his body, accumulating in his right hand and enveloping the inferno rat. The inferno rat trembled violently as it tried to make a sound. However, during the process of it opening its mouth, its body could be seen visibly withering. Even though it managed to open its mouth eventually, it lost the strength to make any noise. Its flesh and blood were being eroded, its spirit and everything else instantly becoming part of the red glow. The red glow carried a sense of greed as it continued to spread swiftly towards the other 2 inferno rats. The other 2 inferno rats were obviously frightened as they escaped with all their might. However, they were still unable to escape from the red glow's pursuit and were quickly enveloped by it. When the red glow returned to Wang Baoli, the donkey realized with shock that what remained of the 2 inferno rats were just some discolored skin and hair. The red glow integrated into the Dharach armor, which was outside Wang Baoli's body, causing traces of blood to appear in its originally translucent form. It no longer looked translucent, but bizarre, when accompanied by the blood traces. Continue. Wang Baoli closed his eyes, sending a voice transmission to the donkey after sensing the flame-snatched Dharach armor. The voice sounded even more frightening to the donkey than before. It hurriedly nodded its head, as if worried that Wang Baoli would swallow it if it didn't manage to find enough inferno rats. Therefore, it clearly became a maniac as it searched for more inferno rats furiously, its eyes turning red and its nose tired. This continued and days passed. Wang Baoli's killings continued, and as inferno rats were continuously killed by his flame snatch technique, his Dharach armor grew increasingly redder. At the same time, as the flame snatch was overbearing, Wang Baoli didn't care whether the inferno rats contained beast cores. After all, the flame snatch technique swallowed all forms of energy, so that even if there were a beast core, it would be destroyed completely. As the killing continued and his Dharach armor grew red, a frightening aura emanated gradually from it. The aura was boosted through the killing of numerous inferno rats, such that in the sea of fire, Wang Baoli's speed and combat power grew increasingly. In the end, the donkey was scared stiff. The more they proceeded, the less Wang Baoli spoke. The overpowering aura and madness emerging from him felt foreign to the donkey. If not for the connection between their spirits, it would have thought that its daddy was someone else. As Wang Baoli continued the snatch, there were soon only 2 days until the trial was to begin. In the days that passed, the entire Dao Palace was in discussion regarding the trial, injecting the whole place with a never-before-seen level of excitement. Numerous outer island disciples also gathered, and the cross-city exchanges between the disciples also grew more frequent. It seemed that in the few days that had passed, the candidates of the trial had been announced, and those who were involved began making detailed preparations for the trial. That was the case for Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao as well, but even though the Federation seedlings came to know about the importance of the matter and tried their hardest to search for clues, they still didn't manage to find out much. 2 days soon passed. On the night before the trial was to begin, a loud boom emerged from a region deep within the Sea of Fire. Even though the sound was underground, it spread in all directions, causing the Sea of Fire to churn violently. The donkey rushed out with all its might in response to this powerful force being released. When it felt that it was a safe distance away from it, it turned and looked anxiously behind it. In the direction it was looking, the red glow was thousands of feet tall as the loud boom reverberated. Painful screams and wails emerged from it, taking a long time before they quieted down. The red glow swiftly contracted, and a figure emerged from it. The figure had its hair flying in the wind and was expressionless with a chilly glow evident in his eyes. Outside its body, the outline of a red-colored, 70-foot-tall figure existed. The outline was very clear, as if made up of uncountable meridians gathered together. It was extremely frightening, and a scary force spread from it. This scene was as if a divine being had arrived. It was Wang Baoli, who had unleashed his flame-snatch the arch armor. The corpse of a 50-foot-tall inferno rat was being dragged by the arch armor's right hand. There was a black horn on the corpse's head, such that even though it had died, a frightening aura was still given off its body. To the donkey, it was clear that it was an aura from a creature that was beyond the late-stage core formation realm, close to that of reaching perfection. That made the donkey shudder, and what made it even more frightened was that, as Wang Baoli approached, the corpse could be seen visibly withering. When Wang Baoli reached in front of the donkey, there was only skin and hair remaining on the inferno rat's corpse. All its flesh and energies was turned into a squirming pool of blood, wriggling into Wang Baoli's arch armor like a fluid. Let's go, it's time to return. Chapter 556, The 5 Great Personal Disciples. Chapter 556, The 5 Great Personal Disciples. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The donkey trembled as it stared at Wang Baoli. It was an instinctive, primal fear. Its daddy, who stood before it, was a complete stranger. The presence he exuded was akin to a sea of blood, and a single word from the approaching Wang Baoli struck terror in the donkey's heart. It shuddered, then sprawled onto the ground limply, afraid to move even an inch. Wang Baoli fell silent at the sight. He was unsure how many inferno rats he had massacred in the past few days before he had reached the first tier in the flame-snatch the arch armor inheritance. He had accumulated a startling quantity of nourishment for his armor. He had also gained a deeper understanding of this flame-snatch the arch armor inheritance that had been partly self-invented and partly inherited. It was clear that as the killings grew and as he continued nourishing his armor, the streak hidden deep inside him became magnified multifold. It began to exude from his person and form a part of his main personality. During his cultivation of the flame-snatch the arch armor inheritance, his emotions lost their usual dynamic qualities. He might not have become more distant, but he was now filled with a cold harshness. He had changed to the point where the donkey was now trembling and staring at him with fear. All of a sudden, Wang Baoli felt slightly dazed. Silently, with a wave of his right hand, which was encased in his armor, the large inferno rat that he had been dragging turned into dust and fell into the Sea of Fire. Wang Baoli's raised right hand tightened into a fist. The flame snatched the arch armor encasing his body began to shine with a bright crimson light before shrinking rapidly. From afar, it seemed as if Wang Baoli's armor had dismantled itself and reformed into veins of meridians formed from spirit chi, and stained blood red. The meridians wormed back inside Wang Baoli's body, gathered at his heart and formed a blood-colored, diamond-shaped patch. Wang Baoli's true physical body reappeared before the donkey as the armor disappeared. The donkey stopped shivering. It raised its head, its eyes filled with surprise and joy. It flew over to Wang Baoli's side, and its head nuzzled Wang Baoli's leg. The expression on its face was that of familiar friendliness. Wang Baoli patted the donkey's head. With the withdrawal of the flame-snatch the arch armor, he instinctively pushed down the violence and bloodlust inside him as he normally did, and a smile surfaced on his face. "All right, Scram. Let's go home." As he spoke, Wang Baoli marched forward. The donkey brayed and followed him hastily. Man and donkey raced speedily through the Sea of Fire, emerging out from the sea in the middle of the night, and headed back to Green Fire Island. When they returned, Wang Baoli sat down cross-legged inside his cave abode and began to condition himself and his level of cultivation, so that both his mental state and his spirit chi remained at peak condition. He allowed his mind to settle as he waited for the day of the trial to arrive. The night passed in silence. The next morning, as soon as the sun rose, a series of bells that surrounded the main vast expanse Dao Palace Island began to ring. The ringing spread outwards and echoed in the air. It was clearly coming from some incredible artifact. The sound of the bells spread far and wide, reaching across almost half of the entire sword handle. The ringing grew fainter as it spread further into the distance. Green Fire Island was situated quite near the main island though, which was why Wang Baoli could hear it clearly as he sat in meditation in his cave abode. His shut eyes began to open gradually as the bells rang. They flashed. As Wang Baoli got to his feet and left the cave abode, this light began to gradually fade from his eyes, and he gave a lazy yell. "Scram, come over here. Your daddy's going to bring you out to play." The donkey seemed unwilling to comply. However, it dared not disobey Wang Baoli and ran over with its head drooping. Before it could bray, Wang Baoli grabbed it and threw it into his storage bag. Then, with a single whirl, he transformed into a rainbow and shot towards the main vast expanse Dao Palace Island like a lightning bolt. Wang Baoli wasn't the only one racing towards the vast expanse Dao Palace. Participants from the islands all around the main island had begun their journey as soon as they had heard the bells. Many more cultivators who weren't qualified to participate were also headed towards the main island. They didn't wish to miss out on such a grand event. Everyone was energized and excited, and many formed teams, sending one another voice transmissions as they traveled. They were clearly discussing the upcoming trial. More and more people gathered at the public square at the mountaintop in the vast expanse Dao Palace. There were hundreds of participants gathered on the public square, and spectating cultivators in the outer areas that numbered many times more than participants. They were all engaged in fierce discussion. However, the participants were clearly more controlled in their behavior, as they were being watched by tens of thousands of eyes at the moment, and anything they did stood out. The spectators around them had no such worries. That was why they continued with their loud, excited discussions. Wang Baoli could hear the roar of human voices as soon as he approached the main vast expanse Dao Palace Island. "I wonder if Dugu Lin will be in the top 3 this time. I don't know about Dugu Lin, but I have faith that senior brother Xu Ming will definitely be in the top 3. Who cares about Xu Ming? My eldest senior brother Zhu Chudao can crush Xu Ming and Lu Yun with a single finger." The sounds of heated debates rose in the air. Wang Baoli watched from afar and didn't pay them much attention. He turned and raced straight for the public square on the mountain. 70 to 80% of all participants had already arrived. There were nearly 500 of them, and they were neatly segregated into their respective factions, under Mie Liezi, Feng Churan, and Yuran. Each faction had their own areas. Wang Baoli took one look, walked straight towards Feng Churan's faction, and joined that group of cultivators. His arrival didn't attract the attention of too many people, and even if someone did see him arrive, they only spared him a glance. Wang Baoli wasn't bothered. He found somewhere to stand, then began to look around. He soon saw Kong Dao. Their eyes met, and they were about to walk towards each other. It was then that everyone around them began gasping and shouting. Cheers rose around them outside and in the public square. They came from Mie Liez's faction. "Our eldest senior brother is back. Greetings to eldest senior brother Dugu Lin." Someone began to approach in the air, amidst the cheering. He was dressed in black robes, his black hair drifted in the wind, and his eyes were cold like ice. Amidst the crowd's cheers, he walked, expressionless, towards Mie Liez's faction. As he walked past cultivators from Mie Liez's faction, their eyes shone with awe and fervor. Elder Mie Liez's only personal disciple. Dugu Lin. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. This was his second time seeing the other cultivator. As he assessed his own fighting capabilities against the latter, Kong Dao arrived and stood beside him. "Baoli, I didn't manage to find anything regarding the rules of the trial," Kong Dao whispered as soon as he came close. Wang Baoli nodded. He had expected that. The only pity he felt was for Xie Haiyang's sudden disappearance. He didn't know what happened to the latter, but he hadn't received any response from Xie Haiyang. Perhaps Xie Haiyang couldn't reveal anything due to certain reasons? Wang Baoli thought as cheers began to resound around him once more. He heard multiple greetings to Senior Brother Shu and Senior Brother Lu. Wang Baoli raised his head. He not only managed to guess who they were, but he also saw them. They were the effeminately beautiful Xu Ming and the well-built Lu Yun. These two were Feng Churan's personal disciples, and they were the true prodigies of the vast expanse Dao Palace. They might even be considered princes. They were different from the cold and distant Du Lin, greeting the crowd with faint smiles on their faces, and nodding as they walked towards Feng Churan's faction. That invited another round of passion-infused cheers. Wang Baoli and Kong Dao were like mere weeds next to them. Their presence was faint, and they seemed to serve as wallpaper for the two princes. Following Du Lin, Xu Ming, and Lu Yun's arrivals, many more cultivators began to arrive as well. Zhao Yaming appeared in the distant horizon. She noticed Wang Baoli and Kong Dao and approached them swiftly, landing next to them. As the only three cultivators representing the Federation, they managed to draw the attention of some people as they stood together. One of those was Yun Piaozi. As a member of Yu Rant's faction, he smiled at Wang Baoli after spotting him in the distance, his eyes brimmed with encouragement. Wang Baoli saw that and smiled and nodded in return. He was about to send a voice transmission to the other cultivator and ask if he had received any news when everyone began to cheer again. The new arrivals were a man and a woman. They were Yu Rant's personal disciples, Zhu Chudao and Huang Yunshan. Besides being Yu Rant's disciples, they were also Dao partners. There was a fine story about the couple that circulated in the vast expanse Dao Palace. It spoke of how the male counterpart had mediocre looks and looked like a peasant, while the female counterpart's beauty dazzled like the bright allure of a poppy. They clearly didn't look like a couple when they stood and walked next to each other. Du Lin, who had his eyes shut all along even when Lu Yun and Xu Ming had arrived, suddenly opened his eyes. He stared at Zhu Chudao, and a flicker of rivalry flashed in his deep, unfathomable eyes. It seemed that, save Zhu Chudao, he saw everyone else around him as trash that wouldn't even withstand a single blow from him. Chapter 557, Let's begin. Chapter 557, Let's begin. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Zhu Chudao noticed Du Lin's stare. He grimaced slightly and sighed secretly. If not for his master's insistence that he participated in this trial, he wouldn't have done so. Why am I inflicting this on myself? Zhu Chudao shook his head. He resembled a peasant. With a hump on his back, he looked even more ordinary. His Dao partner, Huang Yunshan, on the other hand, dazzled like a star. Her alluring beauty blinded as she batted her eyes. She was seductive without planning to be, causing many cultivators' hearts to race. They couldn't help themselves. Huang Yunshan not only possessed a devilishly beautiful face, but she also had an extremely alluring figure. Her slim waist swayed as she approached. Those who stared at her felt an itch inside them that they couldn't scratch. Even Kong Dao couldn't help but spare a few glances at her. The expression on Zhu Chudao's face grew more bitter at the sight. He shook his head as he walked towards Yu Rant's faction with his Dao partner at his side. He shut his eyes so that he might see no evil and hence, escape frustration and annoyance. Wang Baoli had glanced at Huang Yunshan's figure as well. However, unlike Kong Dao, his eyes soon landed on Zhu Chudao instead. He might look ordinary, but Wang Baoli trusted his gut. He could sense soul qi on Zhu Chudao, one that was invisible to the eyes of others. The dark sect called it soul qi. It was a unit of measurement for someone who had killed many people and was tainted by the presence of those vengeful souls. Wang Baoli could sense an extremely strong soul qi on Zhu Chudao. His appearance, his slightly bent back, and the way he carried himself might make him seem like an honest and decent man, but in reality, based on Wang Baoli's assessment, he was someone who definitely had his hands stained by the blood of many. That's quite interesting. I thought Du Lin was the most powerful amongst all the vast expanse Dao Palace disciples. I didn't expect that there's also this Zhu Chudao, who's skilled at concealing his true self. As Wang Baoli lost himself in thought, the bells began to ring again. Everyone in the public square fell silent. The spectators also quieted down when they saw silence descend upon the public square. Wang Baoli withdrew his gaze and stood together with Zhao Yaming and Kong Dao, eyes staring in front of them. The bell rang 9 times amidst the silence. The doors to the great hall before them opened, and from within walked out a dozen nascent soul realm cultivators. The disciples stared ahead respectfully as soon as they appeared. They didn't look at the crowd as they lined up on two sides and saluted the great halls. Greetings to the elders. As their voices rang in the air, everyone both inside and outside the public square lowered their heads and saluted the great halls. With part23 in the middle, Mieliezi on the left, and Uran on the right, the three elders walked out from the great halls slowly. Energy waves that surpassed that of a nascent soul realm cultivator immediately exuded from the three of them. The winds stirred, and the clouds shifted. The heavens transformed. An enormous hurricane appeared in mid-air, rumbling and roaring as if it could devour everything in sight. Every disciple was shaken at the sight and overcome with awe. Wang Baoli gathered his spirit energy around him, lowered his head, and extended his greetings as well. Mieliezi's voice rang out across the entire public square. The top 3 victors to emerge in the trial will receive a leaf from the hyacinthus tree. They will earn the right to enter the Worship Palace Pavilion and leave their names on the Tao plate, thus becoming a true disciple of the vast expanse Tao Palace. Disciples who have written their names on the Tao plate will be gifted a different status. They will be able to use their identity tokens to control the great array formation of the ancient sword to a limited degree. Only those who have their names written on the Tao plate can be considered a true cultivator of the vast expanse Tao Palace. Mieliezi's voice was filled with gravity and authority as it rang out in the public square, and the tinge of murderous violence coloring it prevented anyone from trying to question his authority. part23 stood beside him, with no expression on her face, not saying a word. Uran smiled beside her and said nothing as well. The three of them had clearly discussed this beforehand. Mieliezi would host the trial. Even if part23 had been reluctant at first, she had obviously agreed to this arrangement. They must have come to some kind of arrangement. After Mieliezi was done speaking, his eyes shone with a fierce light. His voice lowered, and when he spoke again, it was as if he was casting a spell. The trial will take place in a minor array formation that is a part of our sect's greater array formation, the Endless Possibilities Array Formation. As for the rules, listen carefully, for I will only say them once. As soon as Mieliezi said that, every participant on the public square began to look at him attentively. Wang Baoli cleared his mind and stared ahead in full concentration as well. Together with Zhao Yaming and Kong Dao, they listened carefully to the rules of the trial. The rules were clearly very important. Without them, the trial would seem unfair. After all, out of the 600 participants, there were those at the early stage, mid-stage, and late-stage core formation realm. Despite having no knowledge of the rules, Wang Baoli predicted that the rules should be able to offer the weaker participants some measure of protection. This would allow the trial a semblance of fairness on the surface. As for what went on in reality, it was clear that the law of the strongest would still prevail. Everyone inside and outside of the public square listened quietly as Mieliezi's voice, colored with its typical coldness, rang out in the air. When the 600 of you enter the place where the trial will take place, you will receive a key that's conjured from the array formation. Every 24 hours, that is, every day, the array formation will activate a teleportation that will affect the entire region where the trial is taking place. Keybearers are to sacrifice a key to resist the power of the teleportation and prevent being teleported away. Those without keys will be teleported away forcibly and eliminated from the trial. Mieliezi's words rang out loudly. Everyone had been trying to control their reactions, but after hearing the full set of rules, a myriad of emotions flashed across their faces. They began to discuss amongst themselves in a heated manner. Wang Baoli and company had never come across such rules before. Even the disciples from the vast expanse Tao Palace had not. Simply put, this was a trial conducted via elimination. The smarter ones immediately realized how harsh the rules were. The trial's going to be brutal with these rules. Besides one's intrinsic strengths and weaknesses, I can imagine that protecting your own key and snatching keys from others will be the critical factors in determining who remain the last ones standing in this trial. Every teleportation will consume a key. This means that the number of keys will dwindle. If everyone remains peaceable and doesn't fight after they enter the array formation, there will be no keys left after the first 24 hours. Of course, that's not going to happen. Xu Ming and Lu Yun frowned. They weren't aware of the complete set of rules. They found the changes to the rules too drastic after they had heard them. Huang Yunshan felt the same way too. She had a considering look on her face and began discussing it quietly with Zhu Chudao. Only Du Gulin remained unaffected, the expression on his face remaining cold and distant. He seemed to pay no attention to the rules at all. Wang Baoli had a contemplative look on his face as well after he heard the rules. Zhao Yameng, who was standing beside him, frowned. She quickly analyzed the situation. Such rules were simply another way of stating the law of the strongest. They were similar to what she had expected and yet different at the same time. There's an additional component of luck that's introduced in the trials with these rules. The weaker participant will have more means at their disposal. Extreme danger is also present, which might even result in a chaotic battle. Zhao Yameng said softly in the voice transmissions to Wang Baoli and Kong Dao. Kong Dao nodded. He was frowning as well. As he considered their situation, Wang Baoli suddenly laughed. He didn't say anything, but he had clearly thought things through. The rules were important and unimportant at the same time. There was really no point in making everything so complicated. In the end, everything boiled down to one simple rule, the survival of the fittest. Everyone was deep in discussion. The participants in the public square, especially, were all discussing fiercely with one another. Mia Liez's eyes grew colder. "Silence!" he shouted. His voice was like thunder, descending with a deafening boom that rumbled and resounded in the air. Everyone was shaken and fell silent immediately. "Those are the rules. The teleportations will take place until there are 3 or fewer of you left. The trial will end immediately then. If 3 participants remain, each will get a leaf from the hyacinthus tree. If 2 remain, each will get a leaf and then decide what you will do with the 3rd. If only 1 person remains, he or she will have all 3 leaves. Now, let the teleportation begin." Having said that, Mia Liezi raised his right hand and swept it sideways. The enormous hurricane in the sky rumbled with a deafening roar, and unleashed an overpowering suction force that sucked all 600 participants on the public square into it. The trials had begun. Chapter 558, Everyone, please wait. Chapter 558, Everyone, please wait. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. In the public square that was on the mountain peak on the main vast expanse Dao Palace Island on the ancient greenish bronze sword, an enormous vortex hung in mid-air, unleashing an incredible suction force. Within the blink of an eye, the 600 cultivators in the public square rose into the air, powerless against the suction force, and flew towards the vortex. Just as they were about to be sucked straight into the vortex suddenly shook. With startling speed, it began to split into 3 smaller vortexes in mid-air. The 3 vortexes unleashed their separate suction forces and separated the 3 factions before each sucking one faction right in. This meant that the 3 factions would be relatively secure when they first arrived at the location where the trial was to take place. Du Gulin and his faction were sucked into the first vortex, Zhu Chudao and his faction representing Yuran were sucked into the 3rd vortex, and Wang Baoli, as well as the faction under Feng Churan, were sucked into the 2nd vortex. Describing the entire process might seem like a long and tedious affair, but in reality, the time it took for the vortexes to split into 3 and suck the 3 factions in was but the blink of an eye. Instantly, 600 cultivators that had been standing in the public square vanished. All of them had entered the vortexes. After sucking in the cultivators, the 3 vortexes in mid-air began to spin. Vast quantities of images began to appear in the vortexes. They were akin to real-time security footage that showed everyone participating in the trial. As images of the participants appeared in the vortexes, the hordes of disciples around the public square began to sit down. Everyone lifted their heads and stared skywards, and some began talking with one another. It was clear that they were trying to predict who the top 3 would be. They weren't the only ones settling in. Mia Liezi, Feng Churan, and Yuran, as well as the nascent Soul Realm cultivators, after having their disciples move some chairs over, sat down, and awaited the results of the trial. It might take days before there was any outcome. However, to a cultivator, days went past in a blur. They seemed patient. Mia Liezi was especially proud. His eyes were fixed on Du Gulin only. He was his most powerful weapon, one that he had bet everything on. He was the secret weapon that he was going to use to overpower Feng Churan and Yuran. Our generation is just waiting for Lina to rise to his full potential. Mia Liezi muttered secretly. The never-changing cold expression on his face shifted to accommodate a rare smile tinged with anticipation and hope. Feng Churan, of course, wasn't going to leave. This trial was too important. Even if she wasn't hopeful of the outcome, she still stayed to witness it with her own eyes. Yuran was the only one whose smile never faded from his face. He didn't seem very concerned. He had a couple of looks before shutting both his eyes. As the spectators outside watched attentively, the participants had entered the black holes. They experienced a brief dizziness as they were teleported. When their vision cleared again, they had appeared in a strange world. The place seemed relatively small when compared to the ancient greenish bronze sword. However, it was a sizable piece of land when compared to Earth. In fact, its size was comparable to that of Earth. There were mountain ranges scattered across the land, and oceans and forests filled the area. In the blue skies ahead, 7 suns shone brightly, blasting the land with intense heat. 3 regions in the world shone with the light of recent teleportation. One of the regions was near a mountain range. As the light vanished, the initially blurry silhouettes of Wang Baoli, Zhao Yameng, Kong Dao, Lu Yun, Xu Ming, and the other cultivators from Feng Churan's faction grew clearer and clearer until their full forms completely materialized in the world. The crowd had no time to adjust to their relocation. Immediately after they had been teleported to their new location, they were startled to find a shining key in their hands. It wasn't an ordinary key. The waves of energy it exuded seemed comforting, and it appeared to have certain stabilizing effects on one's cultivation. The rules that Mia Liezi had mentioned surfaced in everyone's minds as soon as the keys appeared. Everyone began to monitor their surroundings warily. After they ensured that there was no danger lurking nearby, they began to familiarize themselves with the surroundings. They also examined the key in their possession. Some tried to keep it in their storage bag, but they found that it couldn't be done. They had to carry it with them. Quite a few people, upon seeing the vast land and the suns in the sky, gasped in shock. The ground? That's too realistic. This is my first time seeing such a vast expanse of land. And the 7 suns in the sky, is this the endless possibilities array formation? As the others discussed in hushed tones, Wang Baoli, Zhao Yameng, and Kong Dao quickly gathered in a circle. They confirmed that the key indeed couldn't be kept in a storage bag. They kept the key near their hearts and looked around them. They had seen vast lands like this before and weren't as shocked as the cultivators from the vast expanse Dao Palace. However, they did spend some time staring at the 7 suns in the sky. They began to discuss via voice transmissions. Based on the rules, we have to be careful of everyone around us. Let's form our own team later instead of following the others. As the 3 conversed, many disciples around them had completed their inspection of the area. Something flickered in their eyes. Even though they all were part of the same faction, many couldn't help their caution. They began to retreat from one another and keep a safe distance from one another. Some chose to leave immediately, racing into the distance. Others, after some consideration, chose to approach their friends and form a team. Soon, more than 100 out of the 200-strong faction chose to leave the area. Feng Churan's personal disciple, Lu Yun, hadn't spared Wang Baoli and his group a single glance. He led more than 30 disciples, who chose to follow him, away. Wang Baoli and the other 2 looked at one another. They stepped back with the intention of leaving this place as well. A group of cultivators with Xu Ming as their leader stood nearby. A cultivator stood next to Xu Ming, seemingly conducting a quiet conversation with the latter. He turned his head, and upon seeing Wang Baoli's departure, suddenly dashed towards them in pursuit. Everyone, please wait. They weren't standing that far away from him. His actions immediately drew Kong Dao's hostility, and a sudden bloodlust surged from Kong Dao's person as he locked his eyes onto his target. Zhao Yameng's eyes flashed as well. With a flip of her right hand, she summoned a compass. It gave off waves of inscriptions that flickered dark and bright. Only Wang Baoli remained unfazed as if nothing had happened. He turned and stared at the cultivator approaching them. He didn't slow down as they stared, coming to a complete stop only after nearing them. He was a young man and appeared to be at the early stage core formation realm. Even though he was at the same level of cultivation as Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao, the expression on his face was clearly arrogant. The smile on his face did nothing to hide that. Instead, it gave others the impression that he was superficial and insincere. Our 3 fellow Taoists from the Federation. I am Liu Wenju, the young man said, then cupped his fists and gave them a slight salute. He didn't give them a chance to speak and continued immediately. Fellow Taoists, this trial is extremely dangerous. It tests not only one's cultivation but also one's understanding of its rules. I will speak the truth. You will not survive long here. Since that is the case, could you perhaps hand your keys over to senior brother Xu Ming? He phrased his words as an inquiry, but his tone was assertive and full of confidence. It was as if he felt that there was nothing wrong with Wang Baoli and his team handing over their keys. In fact, it was the right and natural thing to do. In fact, I'm not sure if you're aware. Senior brother Xu has promised his master Elder Feng that he will do his best to win one of the top 3 placements. Elder Feng will gift the Federation with the awarded leaf from the hyacinthus tree. You'll be helping yourselves if you hand your keys to senior brother Xu. Liu Wenju smiled as he spoke. He stretched his right hand out towards the 3. Upon hearing what he had said, Kong Dao narrowed his eyes, then looked towards Wang Baoli. There was a look of contemplation on Zhao Yameng's face. The 3 of them looked at one another. They could see what they were all thinking. Zhao Yameng turned towards Liu Wenju and smiled faintly. Senior brother, we are sorry, but we wish to help ease Elder Feng's burden in this trial as well. This is also what Elder Feng has requested of us. Liu Wenju raised his eyebrow when he heard Zhao Yameng's refusal. He eyed the 3 of them. With displeasure in his eyes, he turned and returned to Xu Ming. He whispered something to the latter, then pointed at Wang Baoli and his team. Xu Ming laughed and shook his head as if he wasn't bothered at all. He then spoke casually. His words fell straight into the ears of Wang Baoli and his teammates. To each his own. I look forward to seeing how you'll be easing my master's burden. Ha ha. Take care. Having said that, he turned and led the dozen or so cultivators away, flying off into the distance. Chapter 559, Night Sky Map. Chapter 559, Night Sky Map. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli and his team watched as Xu Ming and his team left. Then, they stared at one another and dashed off in another direction. They were on their guard while they traveled. Zhao Yameng began analyzing the rules of the trial. One strategy that almost everyone would think of would be to gather a certain number of keys then hide themselves, Zhao Yameng said softly. After some thought, Kong Dao shook his head. I thought of that too. I found out that while the key can't be kept in one storage bag, it's hard to detect unless someone else is really near you. I can't figure out why the vast expanse Dao Palace would leave such an obvious loophole in. Since this array formation is called the Endless Possibilities Formation, we may be faced with other transformations in this world later as well. After listening to what Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao had said, Wang Baoli fell into a contemplative silence. Then, he spoke slowly. The 3 of them continued their discussion for a while but couldn't decide on a plan. Zhao Yameng finally suggested finding a place to hide out for a while. They could monitor the situation before deciding on a plan of action. The cultivators in Feng Churan's faction had scattered. The cultivators in Mie Liez's and Yuran's faction had done the same. The cultivators began to spread out in their regions. Many people decided to follow Zhu Chudao and his Dao partner Huang Yunshan. Du Gulin was the only person to leave alone. He forbade anyone from following him. As the cultivators scattered across the land, the trial truly began. Outside that world, the spectators watched excitedly in the public square. They knew that the real action was about to begin. There were no intense fights at the moment. In fact, no one had engaged in battle yet. However, the rules ensured that as time passed, every participant would begin to grow anxious. There were multiple ways that this trial could end. Where multiple probable outcomes existed, a betting pool would typically follow. Like the gamble between Mie Liezi and Feng Churan, and like the betting pool that Xie Haiyang had set up privately. This was clearly something that couldn't be done out in the open and so blatantly. However, Xie Haiyang had the means of spreading the news about this and got it done easily. Currently, the people who had placed enormous bets with him numbered in the tens of thousands. Xie Haiyang was also one of the many who were watching the images in the vortexes. However, he was also extremely busy, receiving voice transmissions and taking bets. He had to make adjustments to the betting pool every so often as well. The crowd bustled around him, and many placed their bets on the spot. There were elders from the sect who had noticed what was going on, but as soon as they even began to frown, they received a voice transmission. After reading it, they gave Xie Haiyang an unfathomable look, shook their heads, and ignored what he was doing. Xie Haiyang's betting pool grew bigger and bigger. A middle-aged cultivator standing next to him finally asked curiously, "Fellow Daoist Xie, even though you're the one setting up the bets, will you actually be betting on anyone?" Xie Haiyang smiled upon hearing that. He pulled out 3 gourds from his storage bracelet and placed them in front of him. He pointed at the gourds, then laughed as he told the crowd, "I bet 10,000 battle credits on these 3 people. Their names are in the gourds. Help me keep an eye on them. When the results are out in a few days, I'll open them right in front of you all." Outside the world where the trial was taking place, the crowd bustled. The setting up of a betting pool meant that the crowd was invested emotionally in the trial as they watched what was happening. It livened up the atmosphere. Comparatively, it wasn't as intense or exciting inside the array formation. The trial had just begun, after all, and everyone had just made their entrance. It wasn't yet time for a fight. This was clearly not something Liezi wanted to see. He raised his right hand and formed a series of hand seals. Then, he pointed at the vortexes in the sky. The vortexes suddenly shuddered, and changes began to take place within the array formation. The spectators soon noticed the transformation, which caused gasps of shock to rise into the air. The array formation is transforming. Look at the sky on the screens, it's turned black. There's starlight in the night sky. As the spectators gasped in shock, inside the array formation, a myriad of emotions descended upon the participants as they lifted their heads and saw what was going on in the sky. At that moment, the light around them had dimmed considerably. The change was minute but still perceivable to a cultivator's eyes. The sky above their heads had transformed from a bright and clear one to a dark, night sky. It wasn't exactly a night sky. The light shining upon the land had dimmed, but it wasn't completely pitch black as night would be. The only change was to the blue skies, which had now turned black. It might seem like a contradiction, but this was indeed what had happened. The lands continued to give off light under the black sky. The source of this light was unknown. It seemed as if everything in this world could become a source of light. This was one of the things that made the endless possibilities array formation unique. Wang Baoli and his team had been traveling when the skies suddenly turned black. They stopped in their tracks immediately and lifted their heads, alarm flashing across their faces. The black sky was undergoing a gradual transformation, and a map formed from starlight began to emerge in the sky. It was a clear map of the entire world where the trial was taking place, and numerous key-shaped symbols appeared on the map. They weren't all stationary. Some of these keys were shown in isolation, others were shown clustered in groups of 3 to 5. There were also dozens of keys clustered together. Each key-shaped symbol clearly corresponded to someone who was holding onto a key. Wang Baoli's and his teammates' hearts sank when they found their location as well as their corresponding keys in the aerial map. They did a test. The keys shifted slightly as they moved. They finally concluded that the aerial map was synced with whatever was going on in the trial on a real-time basis. Secrecy was thus no longer an option. The possibility of seeking a safe hideout and hiding away somewhere was also eliminated and no longer a realistic plan. The appearance of this aerial map eliminated their previous doubts and confusion. This is just too vicious. There's no way for anyone to hide here. Our every move will be exposed. Kong Dao gasped. His eyes looked solemn. He could predict that the appearance of this aerial map would heighten the intensity of this trial to the extreme. That's not entirely true, Zhao Yameng said suddenly. Her eyes flashed as she whispered. The map is not completely to our disadvantage. It might seem to expose everyone's location. However, what it does is add an implicit rule to this trial. Before the next teleportation, those without keys will become completely invisible on the map. Wang Baoli frowned as he listened to their conversation, and something flickered in his eyes. Zhao Yameng's spirits were clearly soaring, intense interest flashing in her eyes. She seemed to believe that the rules of this trial and this array formation were an opportunity for her to enhance her proficiency in array formations. She spoke again quickly. This world is quite fascinating. It will activate a teleportation once every 24 hours. That means a teleportation will take place every day. Those with a key will escape teleportation, and those without will be sent away and eliminated from the trial. What's even more interesting is that even if one uses his or her key to evade teleportation the first time, without any additional keys, he or she will have to snatch keys from others in order to escape the subsequent teleportation. Everyone has a day to do that. During that time, they will be hidden, and their location won't be displayed on the map. Those with keys, though, will be shown clearly on the map. They are forcing us to fight and to battle it out for keys. Based on my judgment, the most intense fights and the highest number of casualties will take place on the first day, and many participants will be eliminated. This is because the number of keys is fixed. There are only 600 of them. If there is no intense battle on the first day, and most of the keys aren't consolidated in a few participants' hands, after the first teleportation, many keys will be consumed to avoid elimination. Without keys, those who have become invisible on the map and wish to stay in the trial will have to fight fiercely for another key. However, at that juncture, there would be too few keys left. Keys will become extremely precious. The fight for keys will intensify and reach its climax. Zhao Yameng's eyes shone more brightly as she spoke. She was clearly proficient in array formations and deduction. Her mind moved incredibly quickly, and she managed to distill the key points of this trial with a few words. Chapter 560, I am a hunter. Chapter 560, I am a hunter. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli blinked as he stared at the enthusiastic Zhao Yameng. He would have been able to work this out as well if he had been given some time to think it through. However, this was clearly a mentally exhausting thing to do. Kong Dao eyed Zhao Yameng and was about to say something when Zhao Yameng lifted her hand. Her eyes shone brightly as she said hastily, "Don't interrupt me. There are pros and cons to us sticking together. The advantage of that is that we'll be more powerful when we combine forces. The disadvantage is that we are easier to spot and will attract attention. What we need to be cautious of are those who lose their keys today. Their number will grow, and they are invisible on the map and hidden from our sight. We, on the other hand, are exposed. They are like venomous snakes in the night. As the time to the next teleportation approaches, they will become more frantic and crazier." As she spoke, a breeze drifted past and swept a few strands of her hair astray. She subconsciously pushed her hair behind her ear. Her gesture, as well as the spirited look on her face, made Zhao Yameng extremely attractive at that moment. Wang Baoli watched her and fell into a slight daze. At that juncture, Zhao Yameng noticed the expression on Wang Baoli's face. She was secretly pleased. Then, she turned towards Kong Dao. "Kong Dao, what were you saying?" Kong Dao coughed. Even though Zhao Yameng had stopped him from speaking earlier, he still respected the detailed analysis that Zhao Yameng had done. After some thought, he said, "I have an idea. Why not give Baoli our keys? We will hide ourselves, and if someone does attack, we'll be able to ambush him unexpectedly. Or Baoli can let us have the keys. His level of cultivation is higher, so it might be more effective if he stages the ambush. I've another idea. We can set a trap. You can set up an array formation, and we'll place the key there as bait, then hide and wait. Once someone takes the bait, we can attack together. We can stage multiple traps on the first day and win a few more keys." Kong Dao's eyes began to shine excitedly as he spoke. He seemed to think that this was a good idea. They would gain something regardless of how they set the trap. Wang Baoli's forehead throbbed when he heard what Kong Dao said though, and he glared at Kong Dao. "Kong Dao, the 3 ideas you've given are all about ambushing others. It's either I ambush someone, you two ambush someone, or the 3 of us ambush someone. Why does everything have to do with ambushes?" Kong Dao didn't seem displeased when he heard Wang Baoli's argument. He hit his chest and said proudly, "Baoli, this is something you won't understand. I spent 3 years in the wilderness of Mars alone. This was the tactic I used to survive. This is my first rule for survival. Even at the vast expanse Dao Palace, this was the tactic I used, and it won me plenty of gains. Kong Dao's tone of voice was filled with pride. Wang Baoli pursed his lips. He had gone through thick and thin with Kong Dao, which was why he didn't bother being tactful with him. Kong Dao saw Wang Baoli pursing his lips and began to glare at the latter. He felt that it was necessary to make Wang Baoli understand the importance of a good ambush. He was about to speak when Zhao Yameng, whose head had begun to throb at the talk of ambushes, interrupted them with great annoyance. "Stop bickering. The first day of the trial might be important, but what lies after is even more important. The laws of key conservation apply in this trial, be it regarding the intensity of the fights or the number of keys. If the first day turns out to be an intense fight, the remaining keys will be consolidated in the hands of a small group of people. Out of prudence, a period of stagnancy might occur. What we have to do is to seek the opportunity to hold our ground with the existing rules in place." After Zhao Yameng said that, Kong Dao didn't reply and instead fell into a contemplative silence. Wang Baoli only grew more mentally exhausted after hearing what she said. "I suggest that the three of us work to protect one of us. We'll focus on ensuring Wang Baoli lasts for at least 3 days. This will give us a shot at winning." Upon saying that, Zhao Yameng turned and looked at Wang Baoli. "Baoli, you have to keep your spirits up. We'll focus on examining the night sky map today. If the keys aren't consolidated in the hands of a few, it means that the ongoing fight isn't that intense, and Kong Dao and I will place our keys with you. We will choose between the both of us who is to be eliminated during the first teleportation. After that, you'll still have 2 keys with you. But Baoli, you have to be careful. If the trial really plays out this way, as more keys are consumed, there will be more people looking for new keys. With the dwindling number of keys, if today's night sky map shows that the battle has been intense, then someone will definitely have consolidated a large number of keys. The situation might calm down the second day. If that's the case, Kong Dao and I will not leave. We will all use our keys during the first teleportation. Then, we will join forces. We will either stage an ambush or openly fight for new keys. Regardless, we have to attack someone with many keys and fight for a chance to survive the second teleportation." Zhao Yameng took a deep breath, determination shining in her eyes. She couldn't help but massage her forehead. This trial had both explicit and implicit rules. It seemed like a simple test of elimination, but in reality, there were many possibilities and probable situations. This was something they had never experienced in their training in the Federation's mystic realms. It was extremely complex yet not completely unsolvable. However, the effort required for planning was too much. It was mentally exhausting. What invigorated Zhao Yameng was that with appropriate planning, they would have a great chance of gaining an advantage and other opportunities in the trial. Simply put, only those who are invisible on the map are hunters. Those holding keys are the prey. Zhao Yameng said with conviction. In addition, theoretically speaking, there can only be as many as 8 teleportations during this trial. In reality, though, it won't take as many before the trial ends. Based on my analysis, I predict that the trial will end before the 7th teleportation. That means, as long as we have 7 keys and don't get those keys snatched away from us, we'll be able to earn a place in the top 3. Zhao Yameng's eyes shone when she said that. She continued, "I can only make further predictions after observing what actually happens and use that as a basis for my analysis." Done speaking, Zhao Yameng massaged her forehead while looking at Wang Baoli and Kong Dao. She stared at Wang Baoli and waited for his decision. "Zhao Yameng, I used to think that your cultivation was average at best, and that array formations weren't of much use. My views have changed now." "You're incredible," Kong Dao said, incredulous. He looked at Zhao Yameng with respect and admiration. Zhao Yameng's analysis had been extremely detailed. She had dissected what had been a confusing situation and made it simple and comprehensible. Kong Dao now had a clear understanding of the various aspects of the trial because of her reminder of the invisible participants on the night sky map, the different strategies to ensure one of them remained standing at the end of the trial, and even her confidence over how long the trial would last. Zhao Yameng had mentioned staging an ambush in her second strategy to ensure one of them remained the last man standing. He couldn't help but begin to think about the various ways to stage an ambush. He, too, looked at Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli's eyes swept past Kong Dao and Zhao Yameng. He shut his eyes and began to think. He acknowledged the logic of Zhao Yameng's analysis, as it was very detailed, but his instinct told him that if they did as Zhao Yameng suggested, things wouldn't go as smoothly as expected. Wang Baoli knew where his instincts were coming from. It came from something that other core formation realm cultivators lacked, and that only those who had stepped into the nascent soul realm possessed, one's spiritual perception. This is Zhao Yameng's strategy. It aligns with the cultivation techniques she uses. But this isn't the way I would do things. Amidst his silence, Wang Baoli's thoughts became clearer to him. The lightning Dao that I practice emphasizes the overpowering of one's opponents via lightning. It speaks of breaking infinite spells with a mere lightning bolt. The flame snatch robs the wills of tens of thousands of souls. Fused with the Dharach armor, it strives to overpower and crush all opponents. It represents the drive to advance without looking back. Even if there are no paths ahead, one is to create a path. At that thought, everything became clear to Wang Baoli. He felt better. His cultivation even began to stir with life, seeming to resonate with his thoughts. A sudden aura that Wang Baoli himself didn't even notice appeared around him. It was imperceptible. Even Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao didn't notice it. If Li Xingwen were in the vicinity though, he would have been startled by its presence. This wasn't the first time Wang Baoli had achieved resonance and such an aura had appeared. The first had been in the ethereal Dao College when Li Xingwen had tested Wang Baoli and intercepted a punch from the latter. It had been a punch that infused his will with his spell. Only by doing so could one achieve resonance. Resonance. This was what the Federation called it. The vast expanse Dao Palace had another name for it. It was, the incomparably mysterious Dao. Standing within the resonating waves, Wang Baoli slowly opened his eyes. A tinge of ferocity glimmered in his eyes. It was a ferocity that had appeared a few days ago when he had been in the Sea of Fire while wearing his Dharach armor. He said slowly. Yameng, your analysis is very useful and yet not useful at the same time. There's no need to sacrifice the two of you to protect me. Look at the map in the sky. There are 3 keys approaching us. They are clearly targeting us. That is why, my solution and strategy only consists of 2 words. We fight. The fearsome light in his eyes erupted as soon as he said that. With a sudden step, he dashed out. His destination, the 3 keys on the map that were rapidly approaching them. He headed straight for them. Chapter 561, A Mighty First Appearance. Chapter 561, A Mighty First Appearance. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. As Wang Baoli dashed out, he raised his right hand and summoned the tricolored flying swords. They flew around him, exuding a fearsome aura. One flew under his feet, and it was as if he was standing atop a flying sword as Wang Baoli's hair fluttered in the wind. On his left and right were 2 dazzling colored flying swords. They shot forward, like shooting stars, racing into the distance. Kong Dao watched as Wang Baoli left without another word, charging off like a force of nature. Alarm colored his face as he lifted his head and studied the aerial map above him. Somewhere near them, 3 keys had gathered and were approaching them. It was clear they were being targeted. The intruders had clearly noticed Wang Baoli approaching them, but they didn't stop in their tracks and instead sped up. The 2 would likely cross paths within half an hour. The sight sent anxiety coursing through Kong Dao. He immediately chased after Wang Baoli, yelling after him. Baoli, wait! We don't know who our opponents are or the level of their cultivation. We shouldn't fight them head-on. An ambush is the best option. Zhao Yameng was stunned to see Wang Baoli and Kong Dao dashing off one after another. All her planning had been for nothing. She could feel a headache coming on. With a leap into the air, she dashed off in pursuit, speaking hastily. Baoli, be careful of the hidden cultivators. I did some calculations earlier. More than 100 cultivators have disappeared from the map. Wang Baoli's speed picked up as Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao shouted behind him. He heard them, but he had his own views. This might seem reckless on his part, but Wang Baoli felt that his way of doing things fit the cultivation techniques he was using. Most importantly, he was confident he could do it. Even though he was only at the mid-stage core formation realm, and a majority of the participants were at the late-stage core formation realm, Wang Baoli didn't believe he was inferior to them. Even if his opponent was at the perfected core formation realm, he was confident he could beat him with his Flame Snatch the Arch armor. I've kept a low profile in the vast expanse Dao Palace for too long. I've forgotten what it's like to be in the public eye. Since Feng Churan cannot control Mieliezi, and the vast expanse Dao Palace is unwilling to activate the teleportation for the second batch of Federation seedlings, then I'll show them my true power. I'm going to give it my best shot for this trial. Even though there are benefits to taking a step back and hiding one's strength in the current situation, I will no longer choose to do that. A sharp glint flickered in Wang Baoli's eyes. He took a deep breath and sped up. Countless lightning bolts snaked around his body. He looked like a lightning bolt himself, dashing through the skies, ripping the heavens apart. He approached the three keys that were also racing towards him at full speed. The aerial map showed that both parties were traveling at high speeds. They approached each other rapidly, with only a 50 kilometers separating them. Beyond the 50 kilometers, in the air, 2 men and 1 woman were traveling swiftly. They had a cold and fearsome aura. One of the male cultivators was a middle-aged man with a fearsome look on his face. The other was a young man with narrow, long eyes and a cold, dark demeanor. As for the female cultivator, she was extremely beautiful. They belonged to Mieliez's faction. They knew one another very well and were rather well known in the vast expanse Dao Palace. Based on their levels of cultivation, they were the stronger opponents in the trial. Even though they were only at the mid-stage core formation realm and not the late-stage core formation realm, when they worked together, they stood a fighting chance even if they were to cross paths with a late-stage core formation realm cultivator. The three of them know that we're approaching and didn't run off. One of them is even approaching us. He is coming at us fast. As the three of them continued flying, the female cultivator amongst them frowned and said, I hope we don't come across a late-stage core formation realm cultivator. There's no way we're that unlucky. There are only a few dozen late-stage core formation realm cultivators this round, so don't worry. There's something strange about the person approaching us though. If it's really a late-stage core formation realm cultivator, we can just escape. I believe our opponent won't want to get injured right at the start of the trial either. If it's not a late-stage core formation realm cultivator though, even though it's not right to kill him, we can still break all of his limbs as a warning. The fierce-looking middle-aged man in the team sneered, and an icy glint flashed in the eyes of his teammates. If it's those 3 lowly life forms from the Federation, we can consider killing them. The young woman smiled. A streak of cruelty lit her beautiful face. Having come to a consensus, they deliberately slowed down their pace. It was clear that their opponent wasn't going to run away. Staying put and waiting for his arrival was the best course of action. They slowed down and activated their cultivation, bringing it to peak condition. The three of them spread out slightly, and their artifact circled them. Wang Baoli, who had been 50 kilometers away, was now fewer than 35 kilometers away from them. 35 kilometers. We have approximately 10 minutes. He's in such a rush to give us our keys. Let's take our time when we break his limbs later. Consider that our token of appreciation to him. The fearsome-looking middle-aged cultivator licked his lips. He turned and looked around him. He wanted to find somewhere suitable for surrounding their opponent, to prevent the latter from escaping after being defeated. As he turned around and surveyed the surroundings, trying to find a good spot, the beautiful female cultivator at his side suddenly gasped. Her breathing quickened, and her voice seemed different. It's not 35 kilometers. My God, this person's speed. The woman gasped. The young man beside her also let out a shout of shock. 15 kilometers. Everything happened unexpectedly quickly. When the middle-aged cultivator raised his head and looked over, his pupils suddenly contracted. He didn't need to look at the aerial map. In the distant horizon, he could see a bolt of lightning rumbling loudly. It charged towards them thundering. It moved incredibly swiftly. One moment, it had been at the distant horizon, the next, it was right before them. Thunder crashed as lightning formed from Wang Baoli's lightning Dao surged in the air. His startling speed made it seem as if the entire region of spanning thousands of feet was filled with lightning bolts. They danced in the air. From afar, he looked like a moving electromagnetic storm. The three of them had no time to react. They felt a terrifying spirit energy flooding their surrounding area, enveloping them. It did that so quickly that they didn't know how it had happened. They only felt the descent of what seemed like a heavenly punishment, a lightning strike of legends and myths. Countless lightning bolts surrounded them and exploded before their eyes, and a piercing wind blasted them in their faces. Thunder rumbled in the skies and resonated in the air. The female cultivator screamed as, all around her, her artifacts disintegrated. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her body fell limply to the ground, like a kite cut from its string. The young man beside her suffered the same fate. The weapons that he had taken out earlier seemed like fragile things that couldn't withstand a single blow from the lightning. They exploded. His body was flung backwards. The middle-aged cultivator was at the peak of the mid-stage core formation realm. That was why he had fared better. But blood still spilled from his lips. He staggered backwards, shock and alarm surging inside him. I wonder which personal disciple this is. I am Lu Song. We seek your forgiveness for offending you in any way, Lu Song trembled and shouted out hastily. Their opponent was simply too powerful. He was alarmed and terrified. He could see, amidst the countless lightning bolts, the indistinct silhouette of a godlike figure. He couldn't see his face though, and couldn't identify who he was speaking to. The person seemed slightly plump and didn't look like any of those personal disciples who he couldn't afford to offend and remembered. He didn't spare too much thought on that though. He instinctively believed that their opponent must be a personal disciple. He wasn't the only one who thought that. His teammates thought the same. Their eyes were bright with terror, and they seemed ready to appease the new arrival. However, as soon as Lu Song's words rang out, Wang Baoli's calm voice sounded amidst the lightning bolts. Personal disciple? What's that? Can it be eaten? Wang Baoli stepped out as soon as his voice entered Lu Song's and the other two cultivators' ears, buzzing. He approached Lu Song, whose lips were stained with blood and face colored with terror. He didn't even take a close look at Lu Song's face before he raised his right hand and yanked Lu Song's key away. Then, with a stomp of his foot, he stepped on Lu Song's right leg. There was a loud crack. Lu Song screamed as his leg was broken. Wang Baoli didn't stop. He did the same to the woman and young man, taking their keys and breaking their legs. Then, he stood in midair and stared coldly down at the pale-faced cultivators who finally saw clearly who he was. Their faces were filled with shock and incredulity. You're, how is that possible? Federation's lowly. Wang Baoli. Their heads began to buzz loudly as an incredulous, surreal feeling overwhelmed them. However, as soon as it surged inside them, they heard Wang Baoli's icy voice in the ears. What were you saying about the Federation? The three of them saw the ice in Wang Baoli's eyes and shuddered. The surreal feeling they had was swept away by renewed horror. Chapter 562, Breaking the Rules. Chapter 562, Breaking the Rules. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Thunderous sounds rumbled from the distant sky. Kong Dao and Zhao Yamen gradually appeared in the distant horizon. They were already traveling at extremely high speeds as they had been worried that something might happen. Zhao Yamen unleashed the array formation in her compass, which gave her and Kong Dao an additional burst of speed. That was how they managed to hurry over so quickly. As they approached, they saw Lu Song and his teammates trembling on the ground, terror coloring their faces. They could tell that the three cultivators were at the mid-stage core formation realm. One of them had reached the peak of mid-stage core formation realm and wasn't far from advancing into the late-stage core formation realm. Zhao Yamen was startled at the sight. She stared at Wang Baoli. She had known all along that Wang Baoli was extremely strong. Despite that, both her and Kong Dao were still shocked by the power that Wang Baoli had displayed. He had faced off against three cultivators at the same level of cultivation fearlessly, and managed to injure them heavily within such a short span of time. The extent of his strength was extraordinary. Only someone at the late stage or perfected core formation realm could have done that. Kong Dao had witnessed Wang Baoli's battle with the stone bat statue in the cave abode under the Sea of Fire. However, he had been focused on pushing the stone doors open and couldn't afford to spare too much attention on Wang Baoli. Besides, the stone statue had been an insentient entity. That wasn't the same as fighting a living person. That was why he was shocked. Wang Baoli smiled when he saw Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao. He raised his right hand and made a grab through the air at the three cultivators sprawled on the ground. He got his hands on their storage bracelets. Then, he said indifferently, now, the three of them will be hidden from the aerial map. Their legs are broken, though, and they don't have their storage bracelets with them now. They're stuck here. It doesn't matter if their presence is hidden on the map. Wang Baoli threw the confiscated storage bracelets and the other two keys to Zhao Yameng. Let's go. To our next target. Having said that, Wang Baoli turned and marched into the distance. Zhao Yameng had a strange look on her face. She stared at Wang Baoli, then at the three disciples from the vast expanse Dao Palace who were trembling silently on the ground. She smiled wryly, shook her head, and followed Wang Baoli. Kong Dao took a deep breath. After realizing how powerful Wang Baoli really was, he suddenly felt that there was a chance of someone from the Federation getting into the top 3 in the trial. In fact, they had quite a great chance of achieving that. The three disciples from Mier Liez's faction released a sigh of relief when the other three cultivators left. They stared at one another. They could see the bitterness in the other's eyes, as well as shock that they were still reeling from. Is he really a cultivator, from the Federation, that Wang Baoli? He's obviously at the mid-stage core formation realm, but his fighting abilities may match that of a personal disciple. We've underestimated the cultivators from the Federation. This Wang Baoli is extremely powerful. They grimaced. They knew that this meant they were eliminated from the trial. Their feelings were mixed as they struggled to sit up. Their hearts still raced with fear as they recalled the earlier battle. They waited silently for the teleportation that would occur hours later. Wang Baoli and his team, who had left them behind, were speeding off presently. They were silent as well. After a long moment, Zhao Yameng began massaging her forehead. She still firmly believed that regardless of how powerful one was, it was still necessary to have a strategy. It would increase their chances of success. After some thought, she turned and looked at Wang Baoli. Baoli, we should stay away from others now and avoid trouble. We should be more careful of those who are hidden from sight. Not everyone who's invisible on the map has lost their ability to fight. They are the hunters. Yameng. Wang Baoli stopped in his tracks. He turned and looked at Zhao Yameng, a serious look on his face. He said slowly. All plans fall apart in the face of absolute power. The rules of this trial are secondary to that of absolute law. You shouldn't be so concerned with the rules. If this were the Federation, I would do exactly what you would do and choose the course of action that would reap the greatest rewards with the smallest amount of effort. That is because even though the Federation has entered the Spirit Inception era, it did so recently. We cultivators are still bound by law, as rules have not completely fallen apart. But this is the ancient greenish-bronze sword, the true world of cultivation. I've thought it through and finally understand. Running away won't solve the problem. The strong will devour the weak. In the end, we have to rely on our strength. I may not be able to hide my presence, but I'm a hunter as well. As Wang Baoli spoke, the look in his eyes grew fiercer. He raised his right hand and pointed at the map in the sky. Our 7th key is 500 kilometers away from us. I'll lead you there. Zhao Yameng was shaken by Wang Baoli's words. She admitted to being overly concerned with the rules. Array formations were, after all, another system of rules. She didn't think that her analysis was of no use, but she respected Wang Baoli's decision and thus kept her silence. Kong Dao stood at one side as he listened to Wang Baoli and Zhao Yameng's conversation. He thought that there was nothing wrong with what Wang Baoli had said, but he felt that Zhao Yameng was reasonable in her choice of strategy as well. He smiled wryly and said, Baoli, we have 6 keys with us now. It's enough to last us 3 days. Why don't we wait for the next teleportation to be over before we begin snatching more keys? Wang Baoli didn't reply immediately. He lifted his head and stared at the night sky as he considered Kong Dao's suggestion as well as what Zhao Yameng had said earlier. A moment later, determination flashed in his eyes, and he shook his head. Then, with his back to the duo, he said slowly, in a low voice, "Yameng, the rules of this trial are complicated and allow for too many probable scenarios. You and Kong Dao won't be able to predict all possible scenarios without missing anything. It's impossible to have a full grasp of what's going on and predict every single thing that's going to happen. This is because the inherent probabilities are a result of the invisible participants on the map. They are mobile. It's impossible to predict their exact movements and actions. Even if I helped, the three of us wouldn't be able to predict everything. There is one thing I know though. One powerful man can defeat 10 men. The strongest will prevail. There's no need to plan strategies and consider rules. I only need to remember one thing, and that is to advance and never look back. I don't care about the participants hidden from the map. I don't even care how many keys there are. That's because I don't care about the rules of this trial. Taking the top 3 spots is simple, just get all the keys we can find and eliminate everyone that we come across. I'll naturally become one of the top 3. I might even get first in place. I understand you're worried that we might incur the wrath of the public. But so what if the other participants are forced to join forces to attack us? There are spectators watching. If we manage to achieve that, it'll also prove the worth of us cultivators from the Federation. These are my views. Only weaklings are bound by rules. Only those who break and set the rules have the right to become the strongest. Wang Baoli's voice might be calm, but as he spoke, his cultivation began churning again. His cultivation technique and his will achieved a resonance, and the resonating waves of spirit energy began to exude from his person again. This time, the resonance was stronger than the previous 2 times. It had formed a kind of presence that seemed to have summoned indistinct hurricanes in the surrounding area. They rose into the air. It was an overpowering aura that was fearsome and fearless. It was forceful, akin to a blade that could slice through anything, including oceans and mountains, that stood in its path. The aura was much more distinct this time, allowing Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao to feel it immediately. Kong Dao's breathing stilled momentarily. He couldn't control the trembling inside him. He stared at Wang Baoli, emotion surging inside him. He finally knew why he couldn't compete with Wang Baoli despite his strong battle lust. He had grown accustomed to hiding in the shadows. He lacked a certain overpowering aura that belonged to a true prodigy. A cultivator is supposed to fight with other cultivators and challenge the heavens. He's supposed to face challenges head-on and go against the flow of nature and the heavenly laws. That's how he can advance fearlessly. If he doesn't fall, he will definitely be able to create new paths to the great Tao. Zhao Yameng stared at Wang Baoli in a daze. There was comprehension in her eyes. Just as understanding dawned on both her and Kong Dao, there was a sudden transformation in the aerial map. In the distant northwestern region, far away from them, 4 keys had gathered together. It might seem as if they were in the possession of 3 to 4 people, but it was more likely that they were in the possession of only one person. The person moved swiftly in a straight line. Where he passed, other keys around him swiftly vanished and clustered around him. The original number of keys kept increasing in number. In a short period of time, it reached more than a dozen keys. It was as if an invisible vortex had formed where the dozen or so keys had been, affecting the surrounding area and triggering a chain reaction, causing more keys to disappear and new keys to reappear and replace their absence. Those who had lost their keys had begun fighting for new keys. The cluster of a dozen keys moved swiftly. It charged ahead, seemingly crushing everything in sight. The number of keys grew. If these keys were truly being held by one person, then at this moment, the impression that he was giving all cultivators looking at the map was that of a forceful entity that was overwhelming and overpowering, advancing fearlessly against all forces of nature. The feeling it gave Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao was even more intense. This was because the aura that this cluster of keys was giving in the northwestern region was exactly the same as that which Wang Baoli had exuded earlier, one that disdained hiding and disregarded the rules. If there's only one person in the northwestern region, then it must be one of the prodigies. Zhao Yameng reeled back with shock once again. She turned and stared at Wang Baoli, and understanding dawned on her. Wang Baoli had noticed what was going on in the aerial map as well. His eyes flashed brightly, like starlight. A smile appeared on his face, and he was bathed in an intense battle lust. That is my true opponent. Chapter 563, Good Luck. Chapter 563, Good Luck. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Just as something drastic was taking place in the northwestern region of the world, outside, in the public square atop the mountain in the vast expanse Dao Palace, the spectating crowds of cultivators watching the three vortexes began to gasp. Many got to their feet and stared unblinkingly at a particular image in the vortex, at a disciple from Mier Liez's faction. There were too many images moving in the vortexes. However, the one that currently held everyone's attention was showing something most incredible. On the projection was Mier Liez's personal disciple, Du Gulin, his face expressionless and cold. He was racing in mid-air presently, so quickly it seemed that he had reached the limits of how fast a core formation realm cultivator could go. In the blink of an eye, he approached a cultivator from Feng Churan's faction. The other had no chance to speak before Du Gulin struck. With a single finger, he sent the other cultivator flying backwards, blood spilling from his lips. The latter passed out from what appeared to be serious injuries. His key flew out from his grasp and towards Du Gulin, who was already racing off. It was clear that Du Gulin required the key, but he didn't seem particularly concerned about getting it. The crowd watched with their own eyes as the earlier scene repeated itself in all images with Du Gulin in them. The number of keys he possessed continued to grow. It had exceeded 40. That was the highest number of keys a single participant had in the entire trial. The spectators in the public square started making noises as their breathing quickened. Those from Mier Liez's faction, especially, grew extremely excited as they cheered. Eldest senior brother Du Gulin, he is invincible amongst all core formation realm cultivators. Ha ha, I bet 500 battle credits on eldest senior brother Du Gulin. It's a sure win. I've said it before, this trial is essentially a battle amongst the personal disciples. The other personal disciples must be growing nervous. As compared to the cheers from Mier Liez's faction, the cultivators from Feng Churan's faction all had sullen expressions on their faces. They stared at the projections showing Xu Ming and Lu Yun and longed to see their incredible performance. While the disciples of the vast expanse Dao Palace got carried away emotionally, the nascent Soul Realm cultivators were relatively calm. They were slightly surprised by what they had seen though, as the battle prowess that Du Gulin was displaying was clearly extraordinary. Even Feng Churan was frowning. Next to her, Yuran narrowed his eyes and seemed lost in thought. He turned and saw the faint smile on Mier Liez's face. The three elders didn't speak, but the expressions on Feng Churan's and Yuran's faces shifted as they continued to watch the trial, paying special attention to Du Gulin. There was a commotion in the outside world. Similarly, all the participants in the trial were shocked by the drastic changes shown on the aerial map. Feng Churan's personal disciple, Lu Yun, was the first to react. After a few moments of silence, his eyes flashed brightly. He unleashed his cultivation and abandoned his original plans for stability. An aura of icy violence oozed from his person, and with a sudden burst of speed, he began to sweep the vicinity for keys. He was doing what Du Gulin was doing, relying on his superior strength and striking those he came across, then snatching their keys away. The next to follow suit was Xu Ming. He knew that the rules had changed with Du Gulin's actions. He's trying to speed up the trial and get most of the participants eliminated by the first teleportation. Seems interesting. Xu Ming laughed, a cold glint flickering in his eyes. He chose to go on the offensive as well. There was also Zhu Qudao and his Dao partner. They had stuck together at first, but after discussion, they decided to split up and strike independently. They attacked from two directions with overpowering force and began their hunt for keys. The five of them going on the offensive created a strong chain effect that affected the entire trial. It intensified, and numerous cultivators lost their keys. No one had died yet, but there were cultivators who were maimed as well as those who were seriously injured and lost their ability to fight. There were also some people who lost their keys but retained their ability to fight. Those were often the ones who met the prodigies in their own factions and had surrendered their keys willingly. They had become truly invisible on the map. They were often the ones who posed a threat and danger to others, and the ones who engaged in battle with others as well. The map showed that as all 5 prodigies went on the offensive, the entire world was affected. Keys disappeared off the map every moment and reappeared again, shining. Exchanges occurred endlessly. It was as Zhao Yameng had predicted, an intense first day with countless casualties. Wang Baoli's team was dashing through the air presently as well. What had changed were Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao, who now knew Wang Baoli's choice after a comparison and after understanding his views. They followed him like guards flanking his sides, racing through the sky, advancing forward. Their target was the cluster of 7 keys that they were drawing near. From the map, it seemed that the 7 keys weren't being held by a single person, but by many people. There were various scenarios they might meet with, but Wang Baoli didn't care. No matter how many people their opponents had, he would simply crush them. His aura grew increasingly more powerful as he sped forward. He became a shooting star encircled by lightning bolts, approaching the location of the 7 keys speedily as thunder boomed in the skies. As he approached, Wang Baoli's spiritual sense, which far surpassed that of other core formation realm cultivators, allowed him to see an image of his opponent as he came within a certain distance, even before his opponent could sense his presence. Li Bin? A smile appeared on Wang Baoli's face. His eyes were icy cold. With another sudden burst of speed, he dashed ahead. Ahead of them, where the 7 keys were clustered, not 1, but 13 people stood. They were all cultivators from Mier Liez's faction. Their leader was the one who had clashed with Wang Baoli in the cave abode under the Sea of Fire and had been stopped by Kai Lin, the one who had been harboring murderous intentions towards Wang Baoli, Li Bin. He still believed that Wang Baoli had been lucky that day. If not, he would have definitely been able to kill the latter, and seize the opportunity to scavenge the cave abode that had been opened for the first time in many years. This was a regret that he still held on to. Every time he thought about it, his desire to kill Wang Baoli intensified. That lowly life form from the Federation, Wang Baoli, is here at the trial as well. Hopefully, he won't be as lucky this time, and we cross paths. At that thought, Li Bin sneered. He eyed his companions proudly. As a late-stage core formation realm cultivator, he could be counted as one of the more powerful cultivators in this trial. As long as he didn't cross paths with the 5 prodigies, those freaks of nature, he believed it would be a piece of cake for him to be placed in the top 10. In addition, besides himself, he had gathered many followers as well. That being said, Li Bin knew that his chances of getting into the top 3 were minuscule. That was why he had thought it through and decided that he would trade his keys with a personal disciple for a personal favor. Because of such a mindset, and because of his extreme arrogance, even though he had noticed the 6 keys racing towards him in the aerial map, he hadn't paid it much mind. He had already concluded that his new opponent wasn't one of the 5 prodigal freaks. The 5 of them had more than 10 keys now. It was clearly shown on the map. The highest level of cultivation that the arrival could have was the late-stage core formation realm, similar to his level of cultivation. Unless the size of the incoming party was almost that of his, they were simply bringing their keys to him. We still have to be careful though. He might have done what I did and gathered people who have lost their keys. At that thought, Li Bin finally realized that the new arrival was very near his location. He waved his hand immediately, and the cultivators around him scattered. Li Bin raised his hand and unleashed his late-stage core formation realm cultivation. He was about to speak, but Wang Baoli had been traveling at extremely high speeds. When he appeared at the distant horizon, Li Bin immediately recognized his face. Wang Baoli? Li Bin was overjoyed when he saw that the new arrival was Wang Baoli. He lifted his face skyward and laughed out loud. Without hesitation, he took a step forward and spoke with a voice filled with murderous intent. I can't believe I actually managed to come across the lowly life form from the Federation, Wang Baoli. Today, I'm going to see if you're really that lucky and if a nascent soul realm cultivator will enter the trial and save you. Amidst his laughter, Li Bin waved his hand and pointed his finger at Wang Baoli. Kill him! His voice rang out. The cultivators around him began to sneer. In their opinion, a mere lowly cultivator from the Federation was never going to be able to compete with a disciple from the vast expanse Dao Palace. Even if they killed him, nothing would happen to them. After all, the trial didn't forbid killing. However, everyone was of the same sect and had friends in the sect. Unless it were the last resort, no one would truly try to kill someone. But if that someone were a cultivator from the Federation, the situation would be different. The dozen cultivators charged at Wang Baoli as they sneered cruelly. Wang Baoli grinned as they approached him of their own accord. "I can't let this great opportunity go to waste." A blood-colored light flickered in his eyes. The diamond-shaped Dharach armor seal on his heart erupted and surged outward, emerging from within Wang Baoli's body and expanding outwards. It wasn't the complete Dharach armor, but a mad dance of meridians, a red glow bathed the skies. Chapter 564, The Flame Snatch Devours. Chapter 564, The Flame Snatch Devours. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. They're trying to kill me. If that's the case, I'll fight to kill too. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes. He knew that the trial didn't forbid killing other participants. But everyone was of the same vast expanse Dao Palace. Even if they belonged to different factions, killings rarely occurred. It was clear that double standards were at play where he was concerned. With that thought in mind, Wang Baoli's lips twitched with mockery. His eyes flashed with an icy glint. He didn't hesitate and dashed out so quickly, instantly colliding with the dozen or so cultivators in front of him. Lowly life form from the Federation, die! Kill him! The disciples from the vast expanse Dao Palace all shouted and attacked. All manners of spells and artifacts lit up the air. They erupted with power as soon as Wang Baoli approached. However, as soon as they attacked, Wang Baoli suddenly shifted. A lightning avatar that looked identical to him split from his person. It was as if he had suddenly replicated himself. The avatar didn't stop moving. It charged at the crowd, drawing their spells and artifacts to him. Wang Baoli's true form took another step, and the Dharach armor appeared outside his body. Tens of red-colored meridians, like sharp blades, extended outward speedily and charged at the crowd. Everything happened too quickly. The crowd's spells all landed on Wang Baoli's avatar. They were about to modify their attacks, but it was too late. In the blink of an eye, the red-colored meridians outside Wang Baoli's body sliced through all artifacts, disregarded the power of all spells, and pierced the foreheads of 5 people. The 5 cultivators screamed. As they screamed, their bodies shuddered and shriveled right before everyone's eyes. Their bodies were dragged along, without their control, by the red-colored meridians that were Wang Baoli's Dharach armor. They swayed and circled the surrounding. Everything happened right before everyone's eyes. From the crowd's first attack to the 5 cultivators being pierced in their foreheads and screaming painfully, everything took but a moment. The remaining cultivators had been stunned. Before they could react, they saw the 5 cultivators, who had been pierced through by the red-colored meridians around Wang Baoli, sway in the air as they were drained of all blood, flesh, and will. They were transformed instantly into mummies. With heavy thuds, they were flung onto the ground. What was even more creepy were the red-colored meridians. They kept wriggling their bodies as if they were sending back everything they had absorbed to Wang Baoli rapidly. The scene sent alarm flashing across the surviving cultivators' faces. They gasped in shock and terror, then retreated hastily. Li Bin's eyes almost popped out. His breathing quickened, and he could feel a prickling on his scalp. But he was a late-stage core formation realm cultivator and mentally more resilient than the others. He took a deep breath and was about to console the others so that they wouldn't lose their will to fight due to terror. Before he could speak, Wang Baoli, with a sudden burst of speed, took a step and appeared in front of an early-stage core formation realm cultivator. Wang Baoli was so fast the latter had no time to react. He was still reeling from shock at the earlier creepy sight. It was too late when he finally sensed Wang Baoli's approach. Just as he was about to retreat, Wang Baoli raised his right hand. Every spell and defensive artifact around this cultivator shriveled up and seemed to be rendered completely useless. A hit landed straight on the cultivator's forehead. There was a loud thud, like the sound of an exploding melon, and the cultivator's head exploded. As his dead body fell to the ground, a blood-colored meridian dashed out. Wang Baoli didn't spare the dead body a single glance. He took another step, relying on his lightning-fast speed, and appeared next to a mid-stage core formation realm cultivator. He found this person familiar. He had been there outside the cave abode and had harbored rather strong murderous intent towards him, one of Li Bin's companions. This mid-stage core formation realm cultivator's reaction was significantly quicker than the early-stage core formation realm cultivator. Shocked, he didn't hesitate as he yelled, "Wang!" He only managed to get the first word out. Nothing else followed. He had bitten the tip of his tongue, spilling a mouthful of blood after speaking. It was no ordinary blood but his secret weapon. The blood transformed into a blood mist. It exuded extraordinary energies of a spell and charged straight at Wang Baoli. However, before Wang Baoli, everything was rendered useless. He sent his fist punching out, striking through the blood mist and landing straight on the mid-stage core formation realm cultivator's chest. With a loud series of cracks, the cultivator's chest collapsed inwards as he spat out mouthfuls of blood. A red-colored meridian pierced through him the moment he died. Everything happened suddenly. Within the blink of an eye, out of the original 13 cultivators, 7 had died. Including Li Bin, there remained 6 cultivators. How is it possible for you to be so powerful? Having seen Wang Baoli kill 7 people with such strange methods, Li Bin couldn't control the shudders traveling down his body. His breathing grew uneven, and his scalp felt numb. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Even if he was at the late-stage core formation realm, he immediately realized that he was no match for Wang Baoli. Wang Baoli's spell was incredibly bizarre and strange. It stank of blood and violence. As he shuddered, he suddenly remembered how Kai Lin had appeared outside the cave abode. It was him that Kai Lin had saved then, not Wang Baoli. He could imagine that if Kai Lin hadn't appeared then, he would have died. He suddenly felt so absurd. To think that he had thought Wang Baoli was the lucky one then. What irony! The one who had been lucky then was him. However, even though he had seen Wang Baoli's power, he still couldn't believe his eyes. He's hidden himself very well. He shuddered again. Li Bin didn't hesitate. He retreated immediately and attempted to escape. He didn't get far before he heard 5 separate cries of terror and pain behind him. The screams struck terror into Li Bin's heart. He was still a late-stage core formation realm cultivator though. At such a critical moment, as he distinctly sensed an immense danger approaching him speedily from behind, Li Bin gritted his teeth and, with a holler, turned and formed a series of hand seals with both his hands. An enormous, illusory seal appeared before him, standing before the approaching single blood-colored meridian. A thunderous boom sounded in the air. The blood-colored meridian shook and was flung away, while blood spilled from Li Bin's lips as he staggered backwards. He didn't feel as if he had just escaped from the jaws of death though. Instead, he descended into further despair. This was because a single blood-colored meridian had been so powerful that Li Bin had to use his full strength to retaliate against it. He had even sustained injuries from the backlash of their collision. Before him was Wang Baoli, who was walking slowly towards him. Around him were blood-colored meridians swaying in the air. They numbered in the dozens. The difference in power between them was so vast, Li Bin's mind broke. He shrieked, his voice shrill in his terror. "I'll hand over all the keys to you. Don't kill me, Wang Baoli. This is a trial. The entire sect and all the elders are watching." His reply was the dozens of blood-colored meridians extending from Wang Baoli's body. They approached swiftly and pierced through his body. Li Bin screamed, resentment and hate clear in his eyes. His body shriveled up and was drained dry. He died. "I've said it before. You were lucky the last time," Wang Baoli said coolly. With a wave of his hand, the partially formed Dharach armor vanished. His body resumed its normal appearance, and while he seemed to be in a slight daze, he soon recovered. The flame-snatch Dharach armor does affect one's mind. However, one will recover after shedding the armor. Wang Baoli mused. Then, he stared at the dead bodies around him. Wang Baoli didn't mind killing others. Firstly, the trial had no requirements and restrictions against killings. Secondly, Wang Baoli knew very well that as long as he got first place, Feng Churan would seize the opportunity. If she didn't, she wouldn't deserve her status as an elder. At that thought, Wang Baoli lifted his head and stared at the aerial map. He narrowed his eyes. After some time, Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao finally arrived. They looked at the corpses all around them, then at each other. They walked over silently and retrieved the keys from the dead bodies. There were 7 keys. Added to the 6 they already had, they now had 13 keys. The 13 keys clustered together. Even though the number of keys might not rival that possessed by the 5 personal disciples, it was still a striking cluster on the aerial map. A long moment later, Wang Baoli withdrew his gaze from the night sky. He turned towards Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao, nodded at them, then continued advancing. The other 2 took a deep breath and chose to follow him. Presently, in the outside world, amidst the numerous projections, someone finally noticed Wang Baoli's earlier massacre. Chapter 565, this is the legendary The Arch Armor Inheritance. Chapter 565, this is the legendary The Arch Armor Inheritance. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Initially, no one on the public square in the vast expanse Dao Palace would have willingly paid attention to Wang Baoli and his team. The most they would do might be to spare a passing glance as their eyes browsed past other projections. That was why even though the spectators could see the aerial map as well, not many noticed when their 3 keys turned to 6. Only the group of Federation seedlings that had gathered at the periphery of the public square had their eyes fixed constantly on the images showing Wang Baoli's team. They had seen with their own eyes when Wang Baoli had charged out, how he had struck instantly, broken the legs of 3 disciples from the vast expanse Dao Palace and doubled their number of keys. They had been invigorated by the scene, but they hadn't made a loud fuss. Even Li Yi had been silent. They had already realized the key to this trial from Wang Baoli's team. Then, they had seen the battle between Wang Baoli and Li Bin's party. They had seen the terrifying blood-colored meridians and Wang Baoli's brutal massacre. The sight had made their breathing turn uneven and quick, and they had grown agitated. That had drawn the attention of the surrounding disciples from the vast expanse Dao Palace. Wang Baoli's massacre had ended by the time the disciples who had noticed something strange was going on had looked over. However, on the aerial map, Wang Baoli's team's keys had increased from 6 to 13 keys. The discovery of that caught many people's attention. They gasped in shock. The keys held by the participants from the Federation, their numbers have increased. 13 keys. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? I haven't been paying attention. How did they suddenly get so many keys without anyone's notice? Something's not right here. The gasps of shock drew more people's attention. Soon, increasingly more disciples in the public square had their eyes on the projection showing Wang Baoli's team. They were all stunned by the 13 keys. Currently, in the trial, the participant with the greatest number of keys was Du Lin. He had more than 40 keys. The next person with the most number of keys was Zhu Dao and the other prodigies. Each had 24 keys or so. Their presences were extremely visible on the map. Wang Baoli's team, with their number of keys, actually placed 6. To possess so many keys in such a chaotic situation was seen as an unwise move by many. It had a great likelihood of drawing too much attention. Despite their shock, most of them shook their head secretly. Many, who looked down on the Federation, displayed scorn and mockery on their faces openly. That was why no one had really paid attention to Wang Baoli's violent murders. Even Mia Liezi himself was the same. After all, there were 600 projections. It was impossible to pay attention to all of them at the same time. Those who had lost their keys, especially, had vanished from the map. They typically found a hiding spot and stayed there without moving a single inch. The matter couldn't be hidden for long though, especially with more people paying attention to Wang Baoli. They wanted to see how their factions had been robbed of their keys. Wang Baoli's strength and power were exposed. The spectators saw with their own eyes as he attacked instantly, injuring 4 participants heavily and snatching another 4 keys. That brought the tally to 17 keys. Many spectators caught those scenes. Soon, a wave of shocked gasps stronger than the previous erupted in the spectating crowd. This Wang Baoli is hiding his true strength. He only took 3 seconds to crush 4 other cultivators at the same level as him, at the mid-stage core formation realm. Heavens! With the rising commotion, Feng Churan, Mia Liezi, and many other nascent Soul Realm cultivators began to notice the strange happenings occurring around Wang Baoli. They were all taken aback. Feng Churan, especially, was stunned. Her eyes widened as she stared at a screen. Wang Baoli and his team were racing forward. Wang Baoli? That's quite interesting, Mieliezi said suddenly. He raised his right hand and pointed. Suddenly, amongst the many screens showing what the disciples from Feng Churan's faction were doing, the one showing Wang Baoli's team expanded in size. It took up half the entirety of the vortex. Mieliezi waved his right hand, and the image began to rewind. The events that had taken place since Wang Baoli's team had entered the trial and everything that had happened after were being replayed. Everyone's eyes zoomed onto the enlarged screen. They saw Wang Baoli strike and break the legs of those three cultivators, and Wang Baoli's battle with Li Bin. They saw with their own eyes the blood-colored meridians extending out from Wang Baoli's body and his massacre of the other participants. A wave of shock and fury instantly erupted amongst the spectators. Many got to their feet and began shouting. What cultivation technique is that? He killed him. The cultivator from the Federation dares to kill our fellow disciples from the vast expanse Dao Palace. As these cultivators raged, the Federation seedlings clenched their fists and fumed secretly. They could do little to help though. Even a few nascent Soul Realm cultivators were staring with icy, murderous light in their eyes. A few turned towards Mieliezi and the other two elders with the intention of saying something. They soon stopped themselves as they saw the myriad of emotions flashing across the elders' faces. Feng Churan stood up, her breathing clearly agitated and her eyes shining with an intense light. The sight sent the nascent Soul Realm cultivators, who had been planning to say something, thinking. They didn't speak but continued to observe closely. The disciples around them also noticed the elders' reactions. The entire public square fell silent. Mieliezi's breathing quickened slightly, and his eyes revealed the complicated feelings he was experiencing. He said, with a low voice, "Is this, the legendary the Arch Armor inheritance? It might look slightly different from what's documented in our records, but there is no doubt that this is the ultimate inheritance that our vast expanse Dao Palace has placed in the Eye of Infinite Techniques, the Arch Armor inheritance." Feng Churan's eyes shone brightly. She seemed overwhelmed with emotions. This kid must have been to the Eye of Infinite Techniques and uncovered a golden opportunity. Not bad at all. To be able to earn the recognition of our sect's sacred land. He is indeed a true disciple of our vast expanse Dao Palace. Feng Churan burst out into laughter. She took a deep breath and sat down again. Her eyes showed her strong approval as she watched Wang Baoli through the projection. She believed that this was the reason why Wang Baoli had suddenly become so strong. As for the massacre, after a moment of silence, Mieliezi decided not to mention it. He knew that to be recognized by the land of inheritance and receive an inheritance was, to a certain degree, to gain the status akin to a core disciple. The sect had collapsed. Else, if they were to follow the traditions of old, one who had his name written on the Dao plate would be promoted to the status of a core disciple after walking out from the land of inheritance. This was a status that was vastly more elevated and esteemed than theirs, which was that of inner sect disciples. Mieliezi might harbor ill will towards the Federation, but his loyalty to the vast expanse Dao Palace was eternal and unchanging. Even though he held no goodwill towards Wang Baoli, in his silence, he couldn't help but observe the latter. He wanted to know what made one who had earned an inheritance in the land of inheritance special. Yuran was silent as well. He narrowed his eyes, and a flicker of cold light flashed in the hidden depths of his eyes, hidden from discovery. It vanished in an instant. The smile on his face remained, and he seemed unfazed by it all. The nascent Soul Realm cultivators and the other disciples around them watched as the three elders chose not to pursue the matter of the massacre. They stared at one another and kept quiet. The Federation seedlings, after a moment of stunned silence, began to grow hopeful amidst their confusion and doubt. The entire public square descended into silence. All eyes watched the 5 personal disciples as well as the projection showing Wang Baoli. Time passed swiftly, and a day soon went by. The first teleportation was going to occur, in 2 hours' time. The aerial map showed the 5 personal disciples each staking their own territory in a corner of the map. Countless keys shone on the map. They looked like stars in the night sky, dazzling beyond measure. Wang Baoli had acquired 20 keys by now. He stood out like a dazzling cluster of keys on the aerial map as well. He was the 6th star on the map in the eyes of the spectating cultivators. The world where the trial was taking place began to grow increasingly quiet. There were still plenty of keys scattered across the map, but their exchanges were growing more infrequent. This was like the calm before the storm. The silence seemed to contain a mad violence that could turn the heavens and earth upside down. The spectators could sense the tense atmosphere before the storm. Streaks of tension began to appear amidst the silence. Everyone stared unblinkingly at the screens, waiting for the storm to descend. In the trial, Wang Baoli was presently standing atop a mountain peak. He lifted his head and stared at the aerial map, a deep look in his eyes. Behind him were Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao. They were slightly injured. Kong Dao appeared as he had always been. On the other hand, Zhao Yameng's eyes had become fiercer after half a day. They were going to be the main attack force in the coming days. Their targets were the participants who were hidden from the map and planning to ambush them. Wang Baoli would only interfere if they came across someone they couldn't handle. Otherwise, the both of them would fight the enemy. This resulted in not only Kong Dao's but also Zhao Yameng's will to fight intensifying rapidly. They were both silent at the moment. Zhao Yameng stared at Wang Baoli's back as she recalled everything that had happened in the trial. A strange light began to appear in her eyes. She was about to say something when Wang Baoli, with his back facing them and his eyes on the night sky, suddenly said, "Yameng, Kong Dao, how about we do a big one?" Chapter 566, The Stars Quake. Chapter 566, The Stars Quake. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. A big one? The expression on Zhao Yameng's face shifted slightly. She was a smart woman, skilled at analysis. She was also a numinous being. She was a master at both cultivation and research in array formations, both came easily to her. If Wang Baoli weren't one of the participants in this trial, based on her analytical mind, she stood a good chance of being placed in the top 10. That was why she immediately understood Wang Baoli when he said that. She could guess vaguely what he was trying to say. Kong Dao caught on slightly later, but his keen animal instincts allowed him to arrive at a rough guess as well. "Baoli, you mean you want to?" Kong Dao started speaking and then stopped. He didn't finish what he had planned to say. His eyes narrowed and shifted from Wang Baoli to the aerial map and the 5 clusters of stars representing the 5 prodigies. Wang Baoli narrowed his eyes and did some calculations. Then, he took a deep breath and suddenly said, "Follow me. Let's go get him." Upon saying that, Wang Baoli's eyes flashed. He took a step off the mountain peak and into mid-air. His cultivation erupted, and he dashed into the distance. Even though Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao had confirmed their guesses were right, they couldn't stop their hearts from racing. They didn't hesitate, however, and followed Wang Baoli hurriedly. There were less than 2 hours to the next teleportation. The entire world could be said to be relatively quiet and calm. Wang Baoli's team's movements were like a pebble flung into a peaceful lake, stirring ripples across the peaceful surface of the lake and drawing everyone's attention. Wang Baoli cared nothing for these hidden, watchful eyes. He advanced with extraordinary speed, racing towards one direction. His speed increased steadily. There seemed to be a fire burning inside him. It was clearly not fury, but battle lust. The big one that he had been talking about was the 5 personal disciples of the vast expanse Dao Palace. After all, they were the only 5 people in the trial who had collected nearly 200 keys. Regardless of who was eliminated, it would be sufficient to increase their opponent's number of keys multiple times, transforming the latter into the focus of the most attention. Wang Baoli didn't care for becoming the focal point of everyone's attention. However, he knew something clearly. If his opponent were any of these 5 people, even though he was confident he could take them in a fight, they were different from other disciples. If they lost their keys and became hidden from the map, they would become extremely dangerous threats when they tried to rise to prominence or ambush him later in the trial. The only exception was if he maimed them. However, Wang Baoli knew that he might be able to explain away his killing of ordinary disciples, but if he did maim a personal disciple, Even Feng Juan wouldn't be able to contain the murderous intent coming from that personal disciple's master. That is why, the timing is critical. As he raced ahead, a faint smile appeared on Wang Baoli's face. He had been thinking about this problem earlier. He had an answer now. What he had been waiting for was the present, when the teleportation was about to occur. To be exact, the most ideal time was half an hour before the next teleportation. Half an hour wasn't too long or too short a time. It was just right for an intense fight, and enough for one to become frantic with madness. This was especially so for the half an hour before the next teleportation. Every participant hidden on the map would go mad within this half an hour. That was because they would be eliminated if they didn't get a key within this period. Similarly, during this half an hour prior to teleportation, everyone holding keys would be on high alert. No one wanted to have their keys snatched at the final moment and be teleported away and eliminated in the trial. They wouldn't even have time to save themselves from elimination. As a result, any ordinary person would conclude after analysis that within this half an hour prior to teleportation, those without keys would go mad and seek fights frantically. On the other hand, unless those with keys were indeed crazy, they wouldn't choose to engage in any fighting or snatching of keys during this period. They would wait for the teleportation to take place, then attack after. To attack before teleportation would be risky and dangerous, regardless of whether one ultimately won or not. If one lost, he or she would be eliminated. Even if one won, he or she would have to be wary of participants, who were hidden from the map, attacking them with mad frenzy. The risks outweighed the gains. After all, depending on whether one had a key or not, one would be in a completely different mental state when facing the impending teleportation. That was why, be it the cultivators in the trial or the spectating disciples, they all determined that during this period before teleportation, the ones who would seek battle fiercely and frantically would be those hidden on the map. There was a saying in ancient times in the Federation, madness was required for success. To a certain extent, this saying could be used to describe some prodigies as well. Like Wang Baoli, he was exactly like that. What he was waiting for was now. He was going to go against the laws of reason. He was going to make use of the approaching teleportation to eliminate the presence that was a threat to his. After some consideration, he decided that his target would be the personal disciple nearest him. He didn't know who that was going to be, and he had no need to know. He only knew that no matter who the other party was, and which faction he or she belonged to, he would attack. Just as Wang Baoli dashed across the skies and raced towards his target, somewhere else in the sky, there was another personal disciple who had chosen to do exactly what Wang Baoli was planning to do. This person was Dugu Lin. He noticed Wang Baoli's cluster of keys on the map, situated far from him and moving at high speed. Even though he couldn't tell who it was, he immediately realized Wang Baoli's intentions after having noticed the cluster of keys. That's interesting. Who could that be? Is it Zhu Chudao? No matter who it is, to be able to go on the offensive now, he or she must not be a simple character. Dugu Lin narrowed his eyes. Truth be told, he had been surprised to find another cluster of keys besides those belonging to the 5 prodigies on the aerial map. He had believed that only 5 people, including himself, would have been able to achieve this. I hope this person lasts until the end. I want to know who exactly has hidden his or her strength so well. Dugu Lin smiled faintly. He leaped into the sky and, with a sudden burst of speed, rushed towards the personal disciple nearest him. His and Wang Baoli's locations were too far apart. That was why they had not chosen the other as their target and had instead chosen a different personal disciple nearest them. As Dugu Lin released a sudden burst of speed, he transformed into a lightning bolt shooting across the aerial map. Both he and Wang Baoli did nothing to conceal their intentions. Their actions sent cultivators in the trial reeling back. The disciples outside watching the trial were completely stunned. They saw clearly on what had been a calm and peaceful aerial map, 2 stars suddenly shifting and approaching the star nearest them speedily. It's Wang Baoli and Dugu Lin. Heavens, they've chosen to attack now. Wang Baoli's target is Zhu Chudao. Dugu Lin's target is Xu Ming. The disciples in the public square reeled back with shock. They had predicted that this calm before the storm would persist until the teleportation was over, and that the fight would start again after the teleportation had ended. They hadn't expected Wang Baoli and Du Gulin to choose this moment, the most inappropriate and also the most appropriate moment, to strike. It had been a completely unexpected move. After some thought though, it seemed like a completely reasonable move to make. That being said, it still surprised and shocked many people. This included some nascent Soul Realm cultivators, whose eyes were shining with a bright, intense light. Feng Churan's, Mie Liez's, and Yuran's focus on the trial had also intensified considerably. One not only required sufficient cultivation to make a move now, one had to have the guts to do it. The most excited and nervous of the lot were the Federation seedlings. It had been an emotional roller coaster ride for them. The cause of this was Wang Baoli. Presently, some of them were anxious while others were high-spirited. With tens of thousands of eyes watching him, Wang Baoli continued to race across the skies. He had noticed Du Gulin doing the same. What was different was how when Wang Baoli saw the other move, an image of Du Gulin immediately appeared in his mind. This was a result of his instincts and the analysis he had done previously. It had led to his conclusion. It should be him. Wang Baoli withdrew his gaze and slowed down. After Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao caught up with him, he began to pick up speed again. They sped across the night sky like fiery shooting stars, approaching ever nearer to where Zhu Chudao was. Time passed speedily as they raced onwards. There was another half an hour to the next teleportation. On the aerial map, the star that represented Du Gulin finally neared its target. He struck instantly. Even though Wang Baoli couldn't hear the sounds of battle, he could guess at the intensity of the fight. Now, it's my turn. Wang Baoli took a deep breath. His battle lust erupted at that moment, and he charged forward. From a distance, he could see a mountain peak ahead of him. Sat there facing him was Zhu Chudao, his moping face resembling that of an old peasant. When Zhu Chudao saw Wang Baoli, he sighed. His low voice echoed in the air. Why are you doing this? As I expected, it's you. Chapter 567, Defeating You with 5 Punches. Chapter 567, Defeating You with 5 Punches. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Like Du Gulin, Zhu Chudao was similarly suspicious of the 6th star that appeared on the night sky map. Even though voice transmissions couldn't be sent in the trial grounds, as a personal disciple, especially one from Daoist Yuran's lineage that didn't participate in the battle between Mie Liezi and Feng Churan, he had many friends. That was especially so as he had a warm personality. Therefore, he came to know about the identity of the 6th star from someone who had lost his key. However, despite knowing that, he still felt that it was unbelievable. It was only after he saw it with his own eyes that he started to believe it. A solemn look appeared in his eyes. When Zhu Chudao looked in the direction of Wang Baoli also stopped in mid-air, cupping his fists and greeting Zhu Chudao. Fellow Daoist Zhu. Fellow Daoist Wang, is there really a need to battle? You might not be my match. With a bitter expression on his face, Zhu Chudao wanted to convince Wang Baoli to give up. After thinking about it, Wang Baoli nodded his head and spoke. I'm engaging in this battle for more than just myself. Please understand, fellow Daoist Zhu. Please. Begin the attack. Why should we do this? While shaking his head, Zhu Chudao stood up from the mountain peak. As he stood up, he straightened his body, and the bitterness on his face gradually dissipated, replaced by an aura that seemed to be able to strike the heavens. Amidst the loud boom, it seemed as though a hurricane was being produced around Zhu Chudao. The hurricane swept in all directions, producing crazy winds in the surroundings. Looking from a distance, as the winds howled, the hurricane seemed to have transformed into a vortex with Zhu Chudao as the center. As the vortex turned, the aura from Zhu Chudao grew increasingly stronger. In the blink of an eye, it had already spread in all directions. Numerous cultivators standing near him appeared in shock and retreated quickly. It was then that the voice of Zhu Chudao, who was in the center of the hurricane on the mountain peak, reverberated. Junior brothers, please do not come within 10,000 feet of this area. If you wish to watch the battle, do it from a distance. At the same time, Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao had arrived in the air. As they neared, they could already hear Wang Baoli's chilly and stern voice reverberating. Yameng, lay the array formation. Kong Dao, guard the area. the battle between fellow Daoist Zhu Chudao and I should not be interrupted by busybodies. Zhao Yameng nodded and immediately took out the compass to lay array formations around the mountain peak. There was only one use for the array formations, and that was to block anyone from going near. There may have been people who were hiding within the array formation, and Wang Baoli seemed to acknowledge that, but he didn't say anything. Therefore, Zhao Yameng only took a glance and didn't bother with it anymore. Soon, the array formations were completely put in place, and Kong Dao guarded the surroundings vigilantly. Wang Baoli didn't attack immediately and instead waited until the aura from Zhu Chudao had grown increasingly stronger, causing the vortex to be transformed into a typhoon that could tear the space apart. That was when Wang Baoli suddenly spoke. "Fellow Daoist Zhu, there is no time to lose. Let's begin." Wang Baoli looked at Zhu Chudao, and when their eyes met, their gazes seemed to have been transformed into extremely sharp swords that showed their intent to battle. In the next instant, Zhu Chudao moved, descending the mountain peak while bringing the winds that were sweeping in all directions with him. He was like a heavenly venerate as he neared Wang Baoli, his aura so strong that it could be felt even before he neared Wang Baoli. His strong aura resulted in loud bangs being produced, and carried a force that seemed to be able to wither and decimate everything in his path the moment it was released. "Wang Baoli, you aren't my opponent." Zhu Chudao's voice was like heavenly thunder. When it was heard, it was as if an invisible hand or a crashing wave was being brought along, pressuring Wang Baoli. The scene shook Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao. The spectators in hiding also quickened their breathing. Even the Dao Palace cultivators on the public square outside, who had focused all their attention on the individual battles involving Wang Baoli and Du Gulin, were gripped with shock when they noticed the aura given off by Zhu Chudao. While everyone was immersed in shock, Wang Baoli laughed and stepped out. He was someone who had come to battle, not someone who had come to be challenged, and there was no way he could lose out in terms of aura. Therefore, when his foot landed, an extremely strong desire to battle was similarly emanated from Wang Baoli. As the desire to battle was unleashed, Wang Baoli had already clenched his right fist. The force from his physical body, the lightning core, as well as the dark core, were all released and combined together. That, integrated with Wang Baoli's desire for battle, resonating his will and cultivation at that very moment. What that resonance meant was that, in this state, Wang Baoli could exhibit a force that was beyond his capabilities depending on the degree of resonance. If Zhu Chudao's aura were described as crashing waves, then right now, Wang Baoli would be like an indestructible reef that remained undamaged in the face of the turbulent waves. It was perhaps still inappropriate to describe Wang Baoli as the reef. That was because right now, as Wang Baoli unleashed his aura and his foot landed, his right fist punched the powerful Zhu Chudao who was fast approaching in mid-air. Supernova. 10% boost from the resonance. Everything happened in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the duo made contact with each other. It was a battle between their auras and a clash of their consciousness. Loud booms reverberated in all directions, and at that moment, the waves produced from the impact exploded between the duo, creating a force that swept in all directions. Noticing it, Wang Baoli laughed. "Zhu Chudao, I can defeat you with 5 punches." That was the first punch, and now, the second punch. As Wang Baoli spoke, the desire to fight in his eyes grew even more frightening. That was especially so as his desire to fight was complemented by his long flowing hair and the viciousness in his eyes. It made someone feel that he was indescribably overbearing and that his aura was extremely overwhelming. That was especially so as he dared to battle Zhu Chudao as if he were an equal, without bowing down to him. The moment Wang Baoli's voice was heard, he moved, charging forward at high speed. He was like a shooting star as he dashed towards Zhu Chudao with an extremely strong aura. He grew faster and faster, as if he could pass through the emptiness and set off a series of sonic booms. When he neared in an instant, he punched, and the impact caused the heavens and winds to transform. 30% boost from the resonance. How interesting that you are announcing your battle plans. If you manage to fulfill it, it means that you can showcase how formidable you are, with me as an example. Then, let's see whether you can really make use of me to show how capable you are, or, if you will fail. A glow flashed across Zhu Chudao's eyes. At that moment, there was no look of disdain in his eyes at all. Instead, as his aura emanated from his body, an indescribable sense of sharpness could be felt. That was also what made Dugu Lin value him. As he spoke, Ju Chu Dao raised his right hand before sealing it and pointing his finger. Instantly, a purple ball of fire was produced from his finger, transforming immediately from a flame to a sea of fire that enveloped him. As Wang Baoli's punch landed, the sea of fire enveloping Ju Chu Dao was turned into the skull of a giant fire beast. The fire beast was like a Kirin mentioned in the ancient myths of the Federation. It charged towards Wang Baoli at high speed, and amidst the loud boom, it made contact with Wang Baoli's second punch. Loud bangs could be heard in all directions. Wang Baoli trembled, and the blood qi in his body churned. At the same time, the Kirin skull formed from the sea of fire broke apart, revealing Ju Chu Dao, who now had the same desire to fight in his eyes. He had his hand sealed, and his internal blood qi was similarly churning. Void all. A glow flashed across Ju Chu Dao's eyes as he waved his hands. Instantly, 9 cracks appeared in Wang Baoli's surroundings, transforming into 9 purple-colored awls that piercingly charged towards Wang Baoli. Each of those 9 awls released a combat force that was similar to a cultivator who was in late-stage core formation realm. The collective force of the 9 awls was so powerful that it was capable of suppressing any late-stage core formation realm cultivator, and even someone who had perfected the core formation realm would be taken aback. After unleashing the void all, Ju Chu Dao didn't stop. Instead, he neared Wang Baoli instantly, and with a glow of fire being given off his finger, he pointed at Wang Baoli's forehead. Wang Baoli felt its force but didn't retreat. He didn't even unleash the arch armor, as like Ju Chu Dao had said, not only did he need to eliminate Ju Chu Dao, he also needed to use this battle to hone himself. As he waved his right hand, Wang Baoli took out a ribbon from his storage bracelet, wrapping it around him to block the 9 awls. Wang Baoli's thunderous voice could be heard as he gripped his right fist and moved his body forward. Fellow Daoist Jew, this is the third punch. Chapter 568, Whetstone. Chapter 568, Whetstone. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. 70% boost from the resonance. The moment Wang Baoli spoke, the two neared each other. As the fist and the finger landed, and as their cultivation was instantly unleashed, a combined force that was so powerful that it seemed to be able to destroy everything was released from both of them. Amidst the boom, blood flowed out from the corner of Ju Chu Dao's mouth as he retreated. Similarly, blood flowed out of the corner of Wang Baoli's mouth. However, the glow from Wang Baoli's eyes was even brighter right now. He stepped forward while laughing heartily as he attacked Ju Chu Dao once again. A loud boom was produced when the duo made contact, and Ju Chu Dao retreated from the impact. Wang Baoli seemed unrestrained and aloof. As a contender and a challenger, his aura grew even stronger as he unleashed his cultivation once again and neared Ju Chu Dao in an instant. Now, this is the fourth punch. Wang Baoli's voice was like heavenly thunder. At this moment, complemented by his aura, he seemed unbeatable. Ju Chu Dao's breathing uncontrollably quickened, and he had a strong gut feeling that if Wang Baoli were allowed to continually boost his aura without restraint, his fifth and last punch would be incredibly astonishing and earth-shaking. This cannot continue. The fighting spirit in Ju Chu Dao's eyes didn't diminish, and instead burned even more strongly. As Wang Baoli neared him at high speed, he retreated while raising his right hand and sealing it. Instantly, moonlight emerged from his chest. It was extremely brilliant, and as Ju Chu Dao sealed his hands, the moonlight was turned into an image of the moon in front of him. Even though the moon was bright, it didn't carry a sense of pureness. Instead, it seemed extremely bizarre, and evil murmurs that could make people and spirits tremble with fear could be heard from it. It made one feel that those murmurs were extremely evil curses. Cursed moon! Ju Chu Dao bellowed as he pointed with his sealed right hand at Wang Baoli. The moment his finger landed, Wang Baoli was shocked, and a strong sense of crisis exploded in his heart. He didn't have time to think too much, and he turned his body at a weird angle while it was still moving at high speed. However, as a personal disciple of the vast expanse Dao Palace who was valued by Dugu Lin, Ju Chu Dao's ferocity had far exceeded that of ordinary core formation realm cultivators. Even the nascent soul realm cultivators would likely not stand a chance against him. As Ju Chu Dao's voice reverberated, and as his finger landed, it was evident that it was still too late for Wang Baoli to dodge the impact. Instantly, moonlight appeared around Wang Baoli's body. With crisis looming, an undetectable flash appeared across Wang Baoli's eyes, and overlapping figures of his body also seemed to have appeared. However, everything had happened too quickly. As the moonlight gathered at high speed, the image of the moon, which was just in front of Zhu Chudao the previous moment, enveloped Wang Baoli. At that moment, Wang Baoli seemed to have transformed into the moon. The moment the moon enveloped Wang Baoli, feelings of weakness, sleepiness, and fatigue overwhelmed him. Wang Baoli's breathing quickened, and his body trembled. His eyelids grew so heavy that he almost couldn't keep them open, and he was about to fall into a slumber. The fatigue from his body spread from within him like the tides, and the feeling of weakness he felt seemed to have turned him from a cultivator to a commoner. His mood and emotions were also all being affected. Despair, sadness, thoughts of suicide, as well as all the different negative emotions, were being strongly experienced by him at that moment. Even his cultivation seemed to be affected. Put more accurately, it wasn't his cultivation, but his ability to control it, that was affected. He was previously able to control his cultivation perfectly, but due to all the negative effects that he was experiencing, his power of control was weakened by 50%. That was one of Zhu Chudao's trump cards, the Cursed Moon. If it was someone else and not Wang Baoli, Zhu Chudao would have neared immediately and killed his opponent without wasting too much of his cultivation or his dharmic treasures. However, his opponent was Wang Baoli. Even though he didn't understand him deeply, having gone through this short battle, Zhu Chudao had already elevated Wang Baoli's position, placing him as an equal opponent like Du Bulin was. In the face of such a strong opponent, Zhu Chudao couldn't afford to be careless. Therefore, a chilly flash appeared in Zhu Chudao's eyes. Even though Wang Baoli was affected by the Cursed Moon, Zhu Chudao didn't go near him. Instead, he retrieved a wooden figurine from his storage bag. The wooden figurine was black in color. The moment it was taken out, a chilly aura was released from it. It was the figure of a ferocious hound which carried an evil glow in its eyes. When the wooden figurine was taken out, the ferocious hound bit its own tongue, and a mouthful of blood was spat from the figurine. Instantly, a large amount of black chi was produced from the wooden figurine. A ferocious roar that shook the heavens and earth also reverberated. The wooden figurine seemed to have come to life, transforming into a 100-foot-tall, black-colored ferocious hound. The ferocious hound's teeth were extremely sharp, and its eyes carried a look of madness and greed. As it roared, it charged towards Wang Baoli, wanting to swallow him. It was like a hound swallowing the moon during a lunar eclipse. This is the end. It's a pity that you didn't manage to show how formidable you are in the end. Zhu Chudao narrowed his eyes and spoke slowly. The ferocious hound had already neared Wang Baoli with its mouth opened wide in an exaggerated manner. It was about to swallow both Wang Baoli and the image of the moon surrounding him. The onlookers around them, as well as the cultivators outside the trial grounds, were all deeply shaken. That was especially so for the Federation seedlings, who were all extremely anxious. That was when something unexpected occurred. A voice that carried a sense of regret was heard from Wang Baoli, who was enveloped by the moon. It's indeed a pity that you didn't come near. When that voice emerged, a hand that was formed from lightning was extended from the Cursed Moon. It was so fast that it landed on the ferocious hound's teeth in an instant. As it landed, thunder was instantly produced. Explosive waves spread in all directions, and as the noise reverberated, an extremely powerful force emerged from within the Cursed Moon. Not only did it devastate the Cursed Moon, but it also landed on the ferocious hound. In the blink of an eye, the Cursed Moon was destroyed, and the ferocious hound retreated while screaming painfully. Zhu Chudao was gripped with shock, and at that moment, Wang Baoli emerged from the devastated Cursed Moon. His speed had increased significantly from before. He neared Zhu Chudao at the speed of lightning and punched forward. That was the fourth punch. 100% boost from the resonance. The punch clearly harnessed an even stronger force from the resonance. It was like the crashing waves during a hurricane, with each subsequent wave being stronger than the previous. To a certain extent, the lethality of that punch was twice that of Wang Baoli's own combat power. That was because the effect of the resonance allowed Wang Baoli's cultivation and spirit energy to break through their respective limits. As his fist landed, even Zhu Chudao couldn't avoid it and could only try to resist it with all his might. As the loud boom reverberated, Ju Chu Dao spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, and the protective dharmic treasures covering him were destroyed. His chest caved in while blood spurted endlessly from it. As he retreated, a look of indignation could be seen in his eyes. Lightning Avatar. You're right. Wang Baoli created a lightning avatar during the crucial juncture previously. Both the Cursed Moon and the Ferocious Hound had targeted Wang Baoli's avatar, and as his avatar self exploded, which resolved the crisis, Wang Baoli's true self emerged and landed the fourth punch. If Ju Chu Dao hadn't been vigilant and chose to go near Wang Baoli, this battle would perhaps have already ended. Right now, as the duo conversed, Wang Baoli turned and charged towards Ju Chu Dao. He was so ferocious and formidable that if one were to look at everything from afar, Ju Chu Dao seemed to be on the brink of being completely suppressed. Next up, the last punch. Wang Baoli's desire for battle was extremely strong at this moment. He was about to go near when, at that moment, Ju Chu Dao screamed. His retreating body suddenly stopped moving, and his eyes grew bloodshot. A sense of resonance suddenly emerged from Ju Chu Dao's body. You will not be able to unleash your last punch. As Ju Chu Dao spoke, he raised his hands and sealed them. Green veins bulged from his forehead, and his cultivation vibrated heavily. 9 generations. False killing. When Ju Chu Dao spoke, illusory figures appeared from Ju Chu Dao's body. Each of the illusory figures was an image of him. Together with his true body, it looked as if the reincarnations from 9 generations had appeared together. When he sealed his hands, so did the illusory figures. Frightening auras that could freeze the spectators in fear emerged from Ju Chu Dao's body at that moment. Chapter 569, Domineering. Chapter 569, Domineering. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The reincarnation of the 9 generations clearly shared the same origins as the mystic technique of the Federation's 5 generation, Sky Clan. The difference lay in that the 5-generation Sky Clan could only call upon reincarnations from 5 generations, while Ju Chu Dao could call upon reincarnations from 9 generations. Right now, as the illusory images appeared behind him as he sealed his hands, 9 alls appeared between him and Wang Baoli. At the same time, those illusory figures also sealed their hands, causing the number of alls existing between the duo to grow instantly from 9 to 81. The moment the 81 alls appeared, they caused such a strong wave of impact that it shook the entire area, causing the night sky map over the region to warp. Turbulent winds were also triggered, and even the mountain peak beneath them was vibrating vigorously. Large amounts of rock fragments were tumbling down as if the mountain was about to collapse. The ground seemed to be unable to withstand the impact as well. Cracks were seen in the ground, and, coupled with the turbulence of the mountain, it seemed as if the entire area was crumbling. At this moment, Ju Chu Dao's eyes were bloodshot. He roared and raised his hands, and the illusory figures behind him followed suit. They seemed to be moving the 81 alls, pressing on them and directing them towards Wang Baoli. Imprison him! Ju Chu Dao exclaimed loudly. The illusory figures behind him all carried a frightening expression on their faces at the same time. They opened their mouths and screamed in unison, resulting in the formation of a sonic wave that exploded instantly. An astonishing aura was also emanated from the 81 alls as they crisscrossed in mid-air, forming a giant cage that charged towards Wang Baoli while carrying a suppressing force. The killing intent carried by the 81 alls, as well as the imposing threat they had on Wang Baoli, were combined together, such that he wasn't able to throw out his 5th punch. It wasn't that he was unable to release the 5th punch. Instead, the shock that he felt from the imposing manner of the alls made him lose confidence in the ability of his punch to lead him to victory. In addition, as the cage formed by the 81 alls neared Wang Baoli, an indescribable suppressive force that seemed impossible to fight against exploded like a tsunami. It contained an extremely high pressure as if it could decimate him. With crisis looming, a chilly glow flashed across Wang Baoli's eyes. He didn't wish to dodge, nor did he wish to activate the arch armor so soon. He narrowed his eyes and raised his right hand, and 3 1-use 8th grade dharmic armaments flew out from his storage bracelet, surrounding him. The 3 dharmic treasures, which were each in the form of a clock, looked identical. Once they were taken out, they began to grow larger in size, each bigger than the other as if they were building on top of each other. They enveloped Wang Baoli. Looking at it from a distance, The three dharmic treasures seemed to have formed a protective covering so sturdy that they appeared like the mountainous rocks that even a tsunami couldn't destroy. Suppressive forces emanated from the dharmic treasures as they took on the impact of the 81 Alls head-on. It all took place in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the 81 Alls neared and made contact with Wang Baoli's one-use 8th-grade dharmic armaments. "You can block it!" Zhu Chudao bellowed as he stepped forward. However, just as he said that and his foot landed on the ground, Wang Baoli's voice reverberated. "It is not part of my Dao to use blocking as a strategy." The desire for combat could be seen in the eyes of Wang Baoli, who was within the protection of the clocks. As he spoke, he pushed his hands towards both sides of the protection and roared with a deep voice. "Explode!" The moment his voice was heard, the clock on the outermost layer vibrated and exploded in an instant. A powerful force churned and spread in all directions, forming an invisible hand that charged towards the incoming tsunami like all. That wasn't the end. The fighting spirit in Wang Baoli's eyes grew even stronger. His voice was heard again, and this time, he ordered for 2 explosions. The second, as well as the last clock exploded almost at the same instant, creating an impact that added on to the previous one that was produced. That caused the invisible hand to swell, and it slapped the Alls hard. It was as if it wanted to open up a pathway within the cage formed by the Alls. In this battle with Zhu Chudao, the spells, as well as the thought and flexibility that both sides adopted in their battle techniques, were on the level of someone who was at the peak of the core formation realm. To a certain extent, the battle between them could be used as a case study. If their opponents weren't each other and were instead any of the bystanders, that opponent would have long been defeated, unless they were as savage of either of them. However, that was still a hypothetical scenario. Wang Baoli had a strong desire for combat, and that was the case for Zhu Chudao as well. He seemed to have predicted Wang Baoli's tactics, as he sealed his hands and pointed just as the 3 clocks self-exploded and the invisible hand was carrying out the slap. Instantly, the Alls gathered together, transforming the cage formed by the 81 Alls into an All shield. The shield took on the impact from the self-explosion of the 3 clocks head-on. When contact was made, a force that was several times more powerful instantly reverberated. Zhu Chudao's breathing became disorderly, and his hair was disheveled. Blood spewed out of his mouth as he let out a battle cry. "Wang Baoli, you've taken the bait. 9 generations. Anti-shock." As Zhu Chudao's voice was heard, an astonishing anti-shock force was released from the All shield. That large force, which resulted from the destruction of half the number of Alls, combined with the explosive force of the 3 clocks, and it landed directly to propel Wang Baoli away. That was an extremely unexpected turn of events. Wang Baoli's body trembled, and blood spewed from his mouth. His body, which was in mid-air, suddenly tumbled backwards. And even though he clenched his right fist, he seemed to have lost the strength to flail it. As blood spurted out of his mouth continuously, a sense of fragility and weakness could be seen from Wang Baoli. At the same time, an indescribably powerful impact formed visible waves that spread in all directions. Wherever the waves passed, the mountains crumbled and the ground cracked. Even the array formation set up by Zhao Yamen was destroyed at that instant. It was as if a strong gust of wind had blown off all the fallen leaves. Zhao Yamen and Kong Dao were extremely taken aback. In their anxiety, their bodies were also forced to retreat by the impact, without their control. The cultivators who were previously hiding in the area had blood spurting out of their mouths as they escaped to distance themselves from the area. Those people were the participants hidden on the map who had lost their keys. As they escaped with fear, there were 3 of them who looked frightened on the surface but carried a look of greed deep in their eyes. If it were some other time, they might not have harbored such malicious thoughts. However, right now, Wang Baoli was visibly and severely injured. The 3 keyless participants didn't think too much as they leaped into the air, activating their cultivation. One of them was in the late-stage core formation realm, while the other 2 were at the peak of the mid-stage core formation realm. They dashed right towards Wang Baoli, who was now retreating with blood in his mouth. They wanted to kill Wang Baoli and snatch his keys. Zhu Chudao frowned slightly, but as a glow flashed across his eyes, he gave up the thought of going after the 3 keyless participants. If such an elite from the Federation died in his hands, it would be disadvantageous for him in the future. Of course, if the trio hadn't made the ambush, Ju Chudao would still have attacked Wang Baoli one last time. He wouldn't have killed him, but he would definitely have taken away his keys. However, just as Ju Chudao gave up his intention to pursue, and as the three greedy Dao Palace disciples were about to launch their attacks, a chilly voice that carried a sense of regret was heard from Wang Baoli, who seemed to have been severely injured and lost all ability for combat. D***RN it, the three of you really deserve to die. The moment those words were heard, the sense of weakness that was emanating from Wang Baoli vanished instantly. Right now, the resonance of the fifth punch spread on Wang Baoli's clenched fist. That stunned Ju Chudao, and his heart was gripped with shock. It was only now that he realized that Wang Baoli didn't suffer from injuries as severe as he had thought. Rather, it could also be said that Wang Baoli's physique was peculiar and could recover extremely quickly. Regardless, if not for the idiotic trio, had Ju Chudao neared Wang Baoli, he would have come face to face with Wang Baoli's fifth punch, which he had secretly been preparing until now. Without a doubt, that would be the case. Therefore, right now, Wang Baoli's anger and regret could be clearly felt. The waves of resonance on his fist dissipated, and just as the three Dao Palace disciples retreated in shock, Wang Baoli, with a chill in his eyes, pointed his right finger at each of the trio's foreheads. Flame snatch! A scream that sounded so painful that it didn't seem human was heard from the trio. Their bodies could be seen withering visibly, while their energy and life seemed to have been stripped at that instant. They were turned into dried corpses that landed heavily on the ground. That was when Wang Baoli turned around with a solemn expression on his face to look at the surprised Ju Chudao. Even though I didn't physically unleash the fifth punch, in my mind, I have already successfully executed it and have already defeated you. Therefore, the teleportation is about to begin, and this battle should end now. As Wang Baoli spoke, Ju Chudao suddenly felt a strong sense of crisis. He reacted quickly, sealing his hands and controlling the all-shield to move towards Wang Baoli. However, Wang Baoli suddenly raised his right hand. A blood-colored meridian emerged beneath the skin on Wang Baoli's right hand and spread throughout his body. It was extremely sinister and overbearing. It was the Flame Snatch, the Arch Armor. Chapter 570, Observing from Above. Chapter 570, Observing from Above. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. The battle between Wang Baoli and Ju Chudao sent shock waves in all directions. All the spectators were gripped with surprise and shock, especially as they watched Ju Chudao demonstrate his ability to anticipate Wang Baoli's moves, and as they watched Wang Baoli using a series of lures as he attacked. That was especially so for the last moment where the three ambushers suffered a pitiful death. Regardless of whether it was the way or the speed of their miserable deaths, it implied that Wang Baoli's abilities were at a level similar to the peak of the core formation realm, and was sufficiently powerful to suppress others on the same level as him. What was most important was that Wang Baoli was still a mid-stage core formation realm cultivator. What happened scared everyone, preventing them from going near. No one had any intention to attack sneakily, and all the Dao Palace disciples who were watching the battle couldn't help but sweep their gazes at the Federation seedlings in the public square. After this battle, no one would dare to say that there were no elites in the Federation anymore. That made all the Federation seedlings in the public square extremely emotional. After all, since their arrival on the ancient greenish-bronze sword and the vast expanse Dao Palace, they had lived like second-class citizens. The Dao Palace disciples' disdain towards them, as well as the scornful and cold attitude that they had experienced throughout the past year, resulted in pent-up frustration in their hearts. They were cautious in whatever they did, and some of them had even wavered and thought about getting into the good books of the Dao Palace disciples. However, at the current moment, all those thoughts had vanished, replaced by a sense of pride and agitation. Through Wang Baoli's hard work, all the Federation seedlings had proven their worth. Even though it seemed like Wang Baoli was the only elite, at the very least, they were no longer nobodies in the Dao Palace and were able to have a presence. Many people understood that principle. Therefore, the Dao Palace disciples, who were experiencing a myriad of emotions, were much less scornful towards the Federation seedlings. That was seen in both their gazes and attitudes. They had become more solemn, and that was especially so when they watched Wang Baoli on the screen. From their eyes, a look of respect and awe towards Wang Baoli could be seen. However, in their hearts, They were still somewhat unable to accept the fact that Wang Baoli and the Federation were more powerful than they had thought. Thankfully, before the first teleportation, Wang Baoli wasn't the only one who had performed spectacularly, as there was also Du Guilin who fought well. The battle between Du Guilin and Xu Ming was similarly earth-shaking, sending shock waves in all directions. That filled all the Dao Palace disciples in the public square with excitement. As the duo were both Dao Palace disciples as well, the exhilaration that the Dao Palace disciples felt was multiplied, and could somewhat alleviate the emotional discomfort that they felt due to Wang Baoli. Du Guilin was indeed formidable. Even though Xu Ming was also a personal disciple and could beat many other core formation realm cultivators, he still lacked compared to Du Guilin. Right now, the battle between Du Guilin and Xu Ming was held on a plain. Numerous cracks had appeared on the ground, and Xu Ming's screams had become the theme song of the area. His body was blown into the air before crashing onto the ground again and again, and this would be repeated every time he picked himself up from the ground. Du Guilin, who was standing expressionlessly in mid-air and hadn't spoken much since the beginning, was like an inescapable fate for Xu Ming. No matter how hard Xu Ming tried, regardless of whether he had self-exploded his dharmic treasures, unleashed his trump cards, or even boosted his attacks with mystic techniques, it had all been useless. All those efforts were simply negated by a single punch from Du Guilin, and that was the case from start to finish. It was, without a doubt, a complete suppression of Xu Ming. From the beginning until the present, Xu Ming had bled profusely, and his hair was a mess. The hopelessness and indignation in his heart had been transformed into a form of torture that drove him crazy. Du Guilin, your opponent is me. After being thrown towards the ground from mid-air yet again, Xu Ming vomited a clot of blood. When he struggled to stand up, blood flowed from his forehead into his eye, turning his world blood-colored. He looked even more frightening, but his voice didn't carry a sense of madness, only bitterness and struggles. That was because, from the second punch onwards, the quiet Du Guilin no longer focused his attention on Xu Ming. Instead, he had raised his head, focusing on the night sky map, and specifically on the location where the battle between Wang Baoli and Zhu Chudao was taking place. Even though Du Guilin couldn't see the actual battle, a look of desire and anticipation had appeared in his eyes. As such, to him, Xu Ming was merely a nobody. Du Guilin's disregard towards him was what made Xu Ming feel most bitter. He was also a personal disciple, and before this, he was filled with confidence about himself. However, it was only after this battle that he realized that compared to Du Guilin, he was nothing. That sense of powerlessness made Xu Ming bitter, but he was still indignant. Therefore, as he quickened his breathing, a burning desire for battle was rekindled in his eyes. He was about to attack once again, as he wanted to battle despite the possibility of failure. However, at that moment, Du Guilin suddenly spoke. "You are too weak. You will definitely die under my next punch, and I am too lazy to kill you. So, hand your keys over." Du Guilin retracted his gaze from the night sky map and lowered his head to look at Xu Ming, speaking calmly. There was no change to his facial expression, it was still cold and distant. However, as that gaze and those words landed in Xu Ming's eyes and ears, he suddenly trembled. His intuition told him that what Du Guilin said was true. If he continued to attack, then the moment he flew into the air beside Du Guilin would be the moment he would truly be defeated. Should he battle or not? Amidst the silence, Xu Ming felt increasingly bitter and hopeless. The desire to battle in his eyes slowly dissipated. He realized that if he dashed out and survived, he would definitely be transformed, but ultimately, he didn't want to die. As he laughed bitterly, Xu Ming tossed out over 20 keys. As that happened, he seemed to have lost all energy and couldn't support his body any longer, and he landed on the ground. He was looking towards the sky, not at Du Guilin but at the other battleground in the night sky map. "Is that Wang Baoli?" Xu Ming murmured. Du Guilin retracted his gaze. This time, he wasn't looking at the night sky map but in the southeastern direction where Wang Baoli and Zhu Chudao were battling. In the southeastern direction, as Xu Ming was defeated and lost all his desire to fight, the battle between Wang Baoli and Zhu Chudao had also reached its final moments. Zhu Chudao was shocked, but he had been able to swiftly control the all-shield. He also saw that blood-colored meridians had appeared on Wang Baoli's raised right hand. As the meridians spread, and as more blood-colored meridians appeared on other parts of Wang Baoli's body, a large human-shaped outline appeared around Wang Baoli's body in the blink of an eye. The aura was extremely strong and sinister, and it was also presented in an overbearing manner. As Wang Baoli's aura was unleashed and complemented with the resonance from his body, he seemed to have become a divine being. This is the end. As he spoke calmly, Wang Baoli's emotions were clearly affected. His cold and distant voice carried a hint of ruthlessness. He moved his body, and between steps, he unleashed a punch. That punch had exceeded the limits of the core formation realm. It was directed towards the air. Immediately, cracks appeared, and a force that could create chaos in the sky, as well as winds, erupted from it. Looking from a distance, Wang Baoli's body seemed like a blood-colored hurricane. As lightning and thunder interlaced, it seemed as if demons were dancing, sweeping across the skies towards Zhu Chu Dao. That was the real fifth punch. 200% boost from the resonance. The first stage of the Flame Snatch the Arch Armor was unleashed at 3 times the force. As the loud boom reverberated, the blood-colored hurricane landed directly on the All Shield, which is controlled by the screaming Zhu Chu Dao. When contact was made, the All Shield shook violently and began to crack apart loudly. In the blink of an eye, under the force of the blood-colored hurricane, the All Shield was completely devastated. Without stopping, the blood-colored hurricane continued to send shock waves in all directions, and it arrived in front of Zhu Chu Dao almost immediately. At this critical juncture, blood spewed from Zhu Chu Dao's mouth as he took out several protective dharmic treasures, putting in his utmost effort to resist the force. However, those dharmic treasures were extremely weak in the face of the blood-colored hurricane. They were blown apart and turned to ash as the blood-colored hurricane swept through the clouds. Seeing that the hurricane was nearing him, Zhu Chu Dao was turned into a maniac as he flailed his arms in a final attempt at resistance. He controlled all of his illusory figures to pass through his body in an attempt to block the force. However, it was all futile. As the loud boom was heard, his illusory figures made contact with the blood-colored hurricane and were instantly devastated. It was then that the blood-colored hurricane stopped advancing, arriving an inch from Zhu Chu Dao, who had lost all hope. The hurricane dissipated and was transformed into Wang Baoli's the Arch Armor Fist. As Zhu Chu Dao's hair was blown, he looked at the powerful fist in front of him, which carried a sense of madness. He felt bitterness in his heart as Wang Baoli's cold and distant voice arrived by his ears. "You have lost." Zhu Chu Dao shut his eyes, and as the bitterness in his heart grew, he suddenly sighed. When he opened his eyes, he looked extremely indignant. He put on the aura of an old peasant before tossing his keys to the side. He stood up and began staggering into the distance while sighing. "I shouldn't have let the elderly ladies leave. Why did I find trouble?" Without looking at the keys that Zhu Chu Dao had tossed out, Wang Baoli stood there. He seemed to have felt something as he raised his head to look towards the northwest direction. That was where Dugu Lin was on the night sky map. As Wang Baoli looked in that direction, Dugu Lin was also looking in his direction. As the distance between them was great, they couldn't physically see each other. However, that didn't affect their desire to battle each other and didn't influence their decision to look in each other's direction. All this was seen by the disciples in the public square. In their eyes, the scene of Wang Baoli and Dugu Lin looking in each other's direction on different screens cast such a strong impression that it seemed to have been transformed into a deep memory that couldn't dissipate. The entire public square was silent until someone let out a soft murmur. "Elites indeed." Chapter 571, No One Asks About It. Chapter 571, No One Asks About It. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. They were on the trial grounds. As Wang Baoli and Dugu Lin looked at each other, there were also people around them who had lost. However, compared to Zhu Chu Dao's carefree back view as he left, Xu Ming, who was lying in the basin, was feeling a sense of bitterness and was laughing at himself for not daring to take on another battle. Right now, it was also time for the teleportation to begin. The loud boom arrived from all directions in the trial grounds, initially soft but quickly becoming as deafening as thunder. It was as if a humongous giant was screaming at the trial grounds. The map in the night sky warped for the first time. The ground trembled, and the mountains shook. The booms grew increasingly louder as if the heavens and earth were about to flip. The force of teleportation appeared from nothingness, and it was unleashed fully in the trial grounds in the short time of a few breaths. That was the first teleportation, and it would take away a key from everyone. Those who didn't hold any keys would be eliminated. At that moment, the originally calm trial grounds were thrown into chaos. Numerous keyless participants who had lost their keys suddenly rose up, charging forward with all their effort towards those who possessed keys near them. Even though some of them succeeded, most of them failed. As the glow from the teleportation shimmered between the heavens and earth, keys disappeared one after another, and the elimination took place. It was as if there was a hurricane that only those who possessed keys could stand firmly against. Those without keys would be wiped of all the meaning they ever held in the trial grounds by the hurricane. It was the case for both Xu Ming and Zhu Qudao. Wang Baoli witnessed one of his keys being taken away in this wave of teleportation. Zhu Qudao, with his back facing Wang Baoli a distance away, grew gradually blurry as if he was walking into nothingness. The moment before he completely disappeared, Zhu Qudao raised his right hand with his back facing Wang Baoli, as if bidding him farewell. He only managed to wave thrice before he disappeared entirely without a trace. The teleportation came and went quickly. The entire process only took the time of a few breaths. When the heavens and earth returned to a state of calm, the teleportation ended. The warped map in the night sky became clear once again, but the number of keys on it had significantly decreased. Looking at the map in the night sky, Wang Baoli took a deep breath, and Zhao Yameng's voice arrived by his ears. Every time the teleportation happens, it will wipe everything out, eliminating those keyless participants. At the same time, new keyless participants will appear. In addition, this is the only time every day where the tracks of the keyless participants would be exposed. This is because, at every single location on the map where there is a key, there is bound to be a new keyless participant who appears there. As Zhao Yameng spoke, she raised and waved her right hand. Instantly, the compass in her hand shone with a gentle glow, gathering before her and forming a map. I have indicated all the locations where a key was taken away previously. These positions right here are the locations of the keyless participants. According to this, we can estimate the coordinates of the keyless participant. Zhao Yameng said while pointing her left hand at the compass. Immediately, numerous locations glowed on the map formed by light ray. These glowing spots were the coordinates of the keyless participants present on the trial grounds, according to Zhao Yameng's estimations. Right now, there were 3 such spots around them. How should we handle this? Zhao Yameng looked towards Wang Baoli, apparently asking what they should do with the keyless participants located at the 3 points near them. We don't have to care about them. As Wang Baoli spoke, he seemed to have noticed something. After taking a look at one of the spots, he raised and waved his right hand. Immediately, the tricolored flying sword emerged, charging towards the other 2 positions. As the tricolored flying sword flew through the nothingness, cultivators leaped up from the 2 locations. The 2 cultivators escaped hurriedly without even turning around. However, their speed was no match for the flying sword. After a brief moment, painful screams emerged as the 2 of them tumbled to the ground one after another. Wang Baoli didn't kill them, instead simply making them lose the ability to run far for the coming day, restricting them to this region. The tricolored flying sword returned after that. Wang Baoli walked towards the location where the 3rd glowing spot was at. When he neared, something wriggled within it, and a person emerged. The person didn't run away. Instead, he sat there, laughing bitterly and incredulously while looking adrift at Wang Baoli. Baoli! You! Looking at the familiar face that was similar in size to him, a smile appeared on Wang Baoli's face. Senior brother Yun Piaozi. That person was indeed Yun Piaozi. He had seen the battle between Wang Baoli and Zhu Qudao. He was immensely shocked even now, as he couldn't reconcile the image of Wang Baoli in his mind with that before his eyes. Wang Baoli's was so powerful that it completely exceeded his expectations. This made him feel somewhat distant towards Wang Baoli. I have cleared all the keyless participants around here. Be careful after you leave this region. Wang Baoli had managed to understand what Yun Piaozi was thinking about, and also sensed the unfamiliarity that was revealed instinctively by him. Therefore, he only spoke after a moment of silence, and then he looked at Zhao Yameng. Zhao Yameng understood Wang Baoli's intention. she took out a key and placed it before Yun Piaozi. Yun Piaozi, see you back at the sect. Bye. Wang Baoli cupped his fists at Yun Piaozi and then left with Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao, a smile on his face. As they left, Kong Dao looked curiously towards Yun Piaozi before turning back. He naturally understood that Wang Baoli didn't have plans to deal with the two keyless participants initially, and that he only did so because of Yun Piaozi. It could be said that Wang Baoli did so in order to give Yun Piaozi a key to ensure his safety. This made Kong Dao curious. After all, they were Federation disciples, and it was difficult for them to form a deep relationship with the Dao Palace disciples despite having shared some common experiences. In reality, that was the truth. Even though Yun Piaozi was close to Wang Baoli, it was mostly due to Wang Baoli's generosity, as well as the spirit boat gains. It was a one-sided relationship, and fundamentally, this relationship between them couldn't weather major storms. This made Yun Piaozi fall silent as he looked at the key before him. After a brief moment, he raised his head and looked at Wang Baoli and company's back view. He stood up silently and exclaimed loudly, "Baoli!" Wang Baoli stopped his tracks in mid-air and turned to look at Yun Piaozi. Du Gulin fought with Xu Ming previously. You, take care. Hearing that, Wang Baoli thought about it briefly before waving his hand with a smile on his face, then, he turned to leave. When he disappeared before Yun Piaozi lowered his head to look at the key, a tinge of respect appearing in his eyes. His respect resulted not from the act of Wang Baoli giving him a key. Instead, it was because he dealt with the two keyless participants for him specifically. At the same time, he suddenly realized that the difference between him and Wang Baoli wasn't only their combat capabilities, but most importantly, their mindsets. He doesn't even care about the keys or the rules here. To him and the other personal disciples, these aren't important. They didn't need to follow the rules because they have their own rules. That is, to eliminate all competitors other than themselves. It is enough that they are the ones remaining. Yun Piaozi looked at the key and managed to think through everything. When he raised his head, he sighed a long sigh of relief while laughing bitterly. This bitter laugh was quickly replaced by a carefree attitude. He looked up, and instead of picking up the key, he turned and walked in another direction. He knew that it was meaningless to continue persevering in the trial grounds. What he needed was to find a place to meditate and leave when the second teleportation happened. This isn't a trial for ordinary people like us anymore. Yun Piaozi shook his head and walked further and further away. The key remained on the ground, shining brightly, but no one cared about it anymore. In the air a distance away, Zhao Yameng was the first to realize what had happened amongst the trio. She looked at the night sky map, where the key stood unmoving. Even though she didn't witness everything firsthand, she had managed to guess what had happened. After thinking about it, she smiled and looked at Wang Baoli. "Baoli, that friend of yours isn't simple. He knows the appropriate time to part." Chapter 572, Baoli, do you understand? Chapter 572, Baoli, do you understand? Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. As Wang Baoli and company left the trial grounds where they battled Zhu Chudao previously, breathing sounds emerged from the momentarily silent Dao Palace public square. Even though discussions could be heard, most of the disciples remained silent. If it were said that the battle they witnessed between Wang Baoli and Zhu Chudao had begun on fair terms, then the armor formed by blood-colored meridians that appeared outside Wang Baoli's body towards the end, was the factor that caused the entire situation to be turned around. To a certain extent, it couldn't be considered a one-dimensional combat force. The result was something that everyone was unable and unwilling to believe. All the Federation seedlings were silent, and torrents of emotions crashed in their hearts. They felt that Wang Baoli's powers were unreal. Feng Churan was deeply surprised, and she felt a myriad of emotions in her heart. She stared at Wang Baoli through the footage, thinking about how powerful the arch armor was on the one hand, and deeply shocked by Wang Baoli's rising on the other. Before this, she didn't have high hopes for Wang Baoli and company. She even thought that unless a miracle happened, it was impossible for the trio to emerge in the top 3 with their own abilities. However, right now, Feng Churan had to admit that she made the wrong judgment. She had also belittled her ally, the Federation. They have sent such an elite to the vast expanse Dao Palace. I am nothing compared to the Federation's generosity. Feng Churan was focused. She thought to herself that if there were a talent like Wang Baoli under her lead, she would definitely not send him out. After all, if anything untoward happened, the losses would be too great to handle. To her, it wasn't easy that the Federation could do that. Mieliezi also thought similarly. Right now, Mieliezi was looking at Wang Baoli through the footage silently. Daoisturan reacted the same way, but what was different was that in the depths of his eyes, a chilly glow and an intention to kill was hidden. At the same time, as the first teleportation ended, there were only slightly over 100 people remaining on the trial grounds. This was due to the intensity of the first day, which had resulted in a large number of keys being collected. Most of those that remained were scattered all over the place. They were cautious and vigilant towards the possibility of being attacked by the keyless participants. Indeed, according to Zhao Yameng's judgment, as the first day was so intense, the second day was comparatively calmer. Even though fights and clashes still occurred occasionally, everyone knew that there were 4 people on the trial grounds that shouldn't be provoked. Other than the 3 remaining personal disciples, the last one was the personal disciple from the Federation, Wang Baoli. Federation personal disciple was the respectful term that people on the trial grounds gave to Wang Baoli. To them, only the words personal disciple were a good fit for Wang Baoli's identity. Therefore, the locations where Wang Baoli and the other 3 people were at were forbidden grounds for the other disciples. They didn't dare go near those areas and would flee if they even saw them from a distance away. After flying in the air for a period of time and noticing the scattered keys on the night sky map swiftly running away, Wang Baoli called for Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao to take a rest on one of the mountain peaks. To the others, the keys were of increasing importance. However, to Wang Baoli, it didn't matter, and no one dared to snatch it from him either. He knew very clearly that right now, he only had 3 opponents remaining. One was Dugu Lin, one was Lu Yun, while the other was Zhu Chu Dao's Dao partner, Huang Yunshan. Wang Baoli didn't belittle any of the 3. That was especially so for Dugu Lin, who had risen to become Wang Baoli's greatest competitor. If nothing peculiar happens, the top 3 would definitely be chosen from the 4 of you. As Wang Baoli was looking at the night sky map, Zhao Yameng commented softly while sitting beside him. Then, Baoli, do you want to stably enter the top 3, or do you want to try going on the lonely path? A glow flashed across Zhao Yameng's eyes as she looked at Wang Baoli. Kong Dao responded similarly as well and was even tempted to try it out. That was because once Wang Baoli chose the latter option, he would have great advantages. Wang Baoli thought about it and suddenly laughed. I still want to go on the lonely path to eliminate everyone, so that there is no number 2 or number 3, but only a number 1. Then, when the trial ends, each one of us shall take a hyacinthus tree leaf. Let's do it. Kong Dao spoke excitedly. Zhao Yameng rubbed her forehead, appearing as if she had long guessed that Wang Baoli would take that option. She relaxed, and as she heard Wang Baoli's words, she no longer continued to think about the details of the rules here. Since this is the case, then I'll no longer do the analysis. You do it yourself. However, let me remind you that your next opponent might appear even before the second teleportation happens. If I didn't guess incorrectly, it should be Huang Yunshan, Zhu Chu Dao's Dao partner. Coming for revenge? Kong Dao raised his eyebrows. Coming to give us a key. Kong Dao, I've realized that your intelligence seems to have been lowered recently. Zhao Yameng spoke calmly. Kong Dao twisted his mouth and didn't speak. He thought silently in his heart that whoever followed these 2 weirdos had to bow down to them. One was undefeatable in terms of combat power, the other undefeatable in terms of wit. What could he do other than say something? If it were someone else, they would have long lost their sense of existence. Seeing how awkward Kong Dao looked, Wang Baoli cleared his throat, and almost instinctively thought to take out his snacks. However, on the one hand, there were only a few pieces left, and on the other hand, he felt that it didn't match the situation. Therefore, he resisted doing so. Instead, he raised his chin and maintained the proud attitude that he had been putting on in the trial grounds. True to Zhao Yameng's judgment, after the trio rested for half a day, a star worth over 30 keys could be seen nearing them quickly on the night sky map. This caught the attention of everyone inside and outside the trial grounds. Naturally, Wang Baoli and trio also noticed it, but they simply sat waiting, without moving. An hour later, as the star appeared before the trio with astonishing speed, the alluring Huang Yunshan arrived like a ball of fire. She was extremely fast. The previous moment, she was still a distance away, but in the blink of an eye, she was just 1,000 feet from the trio. As she landed on the mountain peak, she didn't look at Wang Baoli, instead, throwing a glance at Zhao Yameng first. Zhao Yameng looked back at her with a smile. Huang Yunshan smiled as well, before turning to look at Wang Baoli, sizing him up. At the same time, Wang Baoli was also looking at that woman. When their eyes met, Huang Yunshan suddenly laughed. Even my man fell in your hands. It seems like I am no match for you either. Since that is the case, I'll give you the keys. Since you've won over my man, you should continue battling and become number one. With that, Huang Yunshan raised and waved her right hand, and tens of keys landed before Wang Baoli. Then, she looked at Wang Baoli once again and smiled before turning to leave. From her arrival to her departure, that was the only thing that she said. Kong Dao was deep in thought, looking at Zhao Yameng and back at Wang Baoli, who seemed to also be thinking about something, before speaking suddenly. Baoli, she must have fallen for you. Otherwise, why would she travel so far to give you those keys? Wang Baoli blinked and was about to speak, but Zhao Yameng snorted upon hearing those words. Kong Dao, your intelligence has indeed been lowered. What do you mean by that, Zhao Yameng? Kong Dao was delighted but purposely acted as if he were angry. In reality, he had deliberately said those words to agitate Zhao Yameng. I don't mean much. However, if my man failed, I would hope that the person who beat him would become the mightiest person in this trial. This way, my man would have failed under the hands of the top elite and not under the hands of other failures. This would minimize the damage to my reputation, and he wouldn't be as disheartened. He would have a chance to rise up again and defeat him with his own hands. Zhao Yameng spoke calmly. Kong Dao didn't know how to argue back and simply mumbled. You're a lunatic as well. That's because you don't understand. Zhao Yameng laughed. She looked at Wang Baoli with a glow in her eyes and asked, Baoli, do you understand? Being looked at by Zhao Yameng in that way made Wang Baoli's heart rate quicken. As Zhao Yameng sat down, he couldn't help but sweep his gaze at her. Chapter 573, Clearing the Area. Chapter 573, Clearing the Area. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Baoli was about to speak, but right then, on the night sky map, the star that represented Dugulin suddenly moved. He was fast, much faster than when he charged towards Shuming. He was headed towards the last personal disciple of Feng Churan, Lu Yun. The distance between the two of them wasn't great. Since he moved with such a high speed, even the outsiders were surprised as they watched. The people that Dugulin passed on the way were also shocked, as they heard the sound of thunder arrive by their ears while noticing Dugulin's figure charging ahead. Dugulin is battling once again. Wang Baoli raised his head to look at the night sky, and Zhao Yameng and Kong Dao also turned their attention towards it. On the night sky map, they saw that the galaxy that represented Lu Yun, which had been moving slowly initially, suddenly stopped. It appeared that it had reached a decision after pondering over it briefly, and then it changed its direction and charged towards where Dugulin was coming from. He wasn't trying to escape or avoid battle, he was moving to take Dugulin head-on. This could only be sensed by the disciples in the trial grounds through the night sky map, as they couldn't see the details. However, the Dao Palace cultivators outside who could see everything going on were gripped with surprise. They witnessed Dugulin charging forward, and they saw Lu Yun changing direction and charging towards Dugulin, an intention to fight in his eyes. They also noticed the decreasing distance between the both of them. They were like two meteors swiftly approaching each other, about to collide. Huang Yunshan giving away her keys just now must have agitated Dugulin, forcing him to act sooner than he had planned. Lu Yun actually took the initiative to battle. The way things are now is simply good luck on Wang Baoli's part. He only needs to continue waiting, and he will enter the top two. As commotion arose amongst the disciples outside, Mieliezi looked more comforted, though he was still solemn. However, a look of anticipation appeared in his eyes. Despite Wang Baoli's rising causing changes in how this trial was playing out, he still believed that his disciple, Dugulin, would emerge as number one. Compared to Mieliezi, Fengchuran was now sighing. Xu Ming was teleported back previously but didn't stop by the public square. The moment he returned, he immediately left, as if ashamed with himself. Right now, only her personal disciple Lu Yun remained on the trial grounds. With Huang Yunshan's decision to give up, the results of the trial were clear, and there was little possibility of a change happening. If everything happened accordingly, the top three would be Du Gulin, Wang Baoli, and Lu Yun. However, the fact that Du Gulin suddenly charged out with his intention to kill Unleashed showed clearly that his goal wasn't to be in the top three. Instead, he only wanted there to be a number one, with no other positions in the trial. Du Gulin. Fengchuran's facial expression was awful as she threw a glance at Daoist-Yuran. However, she realized that Daoist-Yuran still had his eyes shut, and he merely sighed without making any moves even when his personal disciple had been defeated. In the silence, Fengchuran felt a myriad of emotions. She had high hopes of the two of them, but Xu Ming had already been eliminated. Lu Yun was impressive, but compared to Du Gulin, whose ferocity was unleashed, Xu Ming still fell behind. Fengchuran had also realized that Du Gulin wasn't going at full force and was reserving some of his powers. It was without a doubt that Lu Yun would fail. However, Wang Baoli, whom she didn't look upon favorably initially, had suddenly risen up. The last arch armor punch that he threw at Zhu Chudao to defeat him made Fengchuran feel that perhaps the trial was made specifically for Du Gulin and Wang Baoli. If Du Gulin won, he would lead the Dao Palace disciples in the days to come, rising up completely with Mieliezi. Similarly, if Wang Baoli won, his status and identity in the Dao Palace would be transformed. Even the others from the Federation could raise their heads, and few if not none of the Dao Palace disciples would dare to provoke them. This was because the Federation wouldn't only have a personal disciple, but they would have the personal disciple that was the strongest below the nascent soul realm, suppressing even the Dao Palace disciples. As everyone felt a torrent of emotions, Du Gulin and Lu Yun were charging forward at increasing speed. Half an hour later, they neared each other in the central region of the trial grounds, and the battle between the two began as a loud boom was produced. Different from the time he battled Xu Ming, and perhaps because Lu Yun came to battle on his own accord, Du Gulin's attacks were even more decisive. As he sealed his hands, his ferocity intensified, and 9 black dragons appeared behind him, charging towards Lu Yun while screaming. Not many on the trial grounds could see what was happening. Only the disciples near the battle location could see what was going on from a distance. Other than that, only the Dao Palace disciples outside could see what was going on clearly. However, the clearer they could see, the more shocked they were. In reality, personal disciple Lu Yun had already surpassed his peers and was someone who could eliminate those in the core formation realm. However, in front of Du Gulin, he was completely suppressed. From start to finish, Du Gulin only attacked with his fists while the 9 black dragons circled around Lu Yun. Like the battle against Xu Ming, he didn't use other spells and only threw punches. That was enough to make Lu Yun scream painfully, but he still charged out despite being pelted by the punches and thrown to the ground. The Dao Palace disciples fell silent while watching it. They didn't notice that a distance away, the heavily injured Xu Ming had returned, supported by his servant. Looking at the duo in battle, Xu Ming was silent, as if he could see himself in their position. When Lu Yun's body was about to crumble to a state similar to that of Xu Ming's, Du Gulin said the same thing he did to Xu Ming while flying in mid-air. Lu Yun laughed bitterly and didn't avoid the battle. Instead, with a hint of madness, he charged out. Looking at Lu Yun, Xu Ming trembled. Lu Yun did something that he didn't dare do for fear of death. Xu Ming was silent, and he closed his eyes with bitterness in his heart. The battle between Lu Yun and Du Gulin had ended. Perhaps due to admiration for Lu Yun, Du Gulin didn't unleash the final punch on Lu Yun. Instead, he slapped Lu Yun out of the sky, knocking him unconscious and no longer attacking. As the battle ended, the public square was filled with momentary silence. Sounds of delight emerged from Mieliezi's clan. Compared to them, both Fengchuran and Daoist-Yuran's clans were silent, their hearts filled with shock and a torrent of emotions that couldn't rest like the raging sea. Without a doubt, Du Gulin was more powerful than anyone could imagine. He didn't use a second skill against both Xu Ming and Lu Yun from beginning to end. He could simply defeat them with punches and the 9 circling dragons. Everyone could see that Dugu Lin didn't unleash his full force, but no